Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 921 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And of course, it is the Sunday night fundraiser night. It's the best night of the week. And also, speaking of which, we've seen some big explosions in Moscow, and a key power plant is destroyed. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, as we've gotten major news from the area around Moscow that a large oil refinery within the area of the city has been targeted and destroyed over just the past few hours alone, with the Ukrainian drone slamming right into the refinery and causing very significant damage. Once again, showing that the Moscow air defense perimeter is not as watertight, or not really as rock solid as we thought it was yesterday, when some of the drones ended up getting shot down near Podolsk. Meanwhile, we also got to see up in the area around Konakovo that the damage to the power plant is actually significant. And we were able to get footage on the ground today from inside of the reactor, well, not really the reactor, but the power plant hall, once again showing that the damage was very significant, and that this power plant may be offline at this point, or may be going offline very soon, meaning that there will be a massive hole in the Russian power grid within the central region of the Russian Federation, and most likely within a decent portion of northern Moscow. A very significant blow to the Russian military infrastructure if we've seen one so far, and it's absolutely wonderful to see. We've also been able to get some pretty big news from the area around Shakhty. Apparently, on the 5th day of the fire, well, actually the 6th day technically, the fire has now been put out, and it seems that the damage ended up knocking out about a quarter of that entire facility and its ability to supply more fuels to the Russian armed forces and to the Russian civilian population in the surrounding areas. Still, once again, knocking out oil facilities within the area of Rostov-on-Don and further depriving Russian armed forces and Russian civilian efforts around the area of the Donbass and also within the southern Russian Don region. Simultaneously, we also got a little bit more additional news from the area of Kursk, once again showing that the Russians are desperately trying to create a way to get the trapped brigade on the south end of the Reka Sem back across, and we were able to get a little bit more information about the pontoon bridges that have been set up in this area. Not only that, we also got a little bit of a better look at what the Ukrainian forces are currently doing in the Sudzha region as well, as they continue to try and fight their way forward against heavier and heavier Russian resistance to try and gain more ground before the Rasputitsa season comes in, and then these front lines will pretty much be solidified at that point until next year. Moving on from the Kursk region, we also heard some pretty significant news within Vovchansk. We also got to see some pretty interesting developments around Pokrovsk, as Russian forces were taking very high casualties today, but still making slow advances towards the town. And many other things also happened today as well. Trying to get it all out here before we even start covering it, but still a massive load of news if we have ever seen one, and certainly a lot of good things have been going on so far today. But before I get into our first bits of news, the major news coming out of Moscow, I do want to point out that tonight is the Sunday fundraiser night, and we are fundraising for none other than Nova Ukraine. We've already raised about $1,000 so far, and hopefully we can get on up to the goal of $3,000. And of course, I know the Lee Spring Army will. We know that the Lee Spring Army always does, but still, I had to put that out there. It is the Sunday fundraiser night, so make sure to hit that goal, because it will all go to Nova Ukraine and help them out significantly in their effort. As Andy L throws in $225 to the fundraiser. Absolutely.
That's what I'm talking about. And also, it is Labor Day weekend, of course. So I was just told that by a viewer that the viewership and also donations might be a little lower than usual tonight just because of that. But big shout out to everybody who's here tonight, because of course it is typically the time people take vacations. So huge shout out to showing up on the Sunday fundraiser stream, because it does mean a lot to us and also Ukraine as well.
And it really does. And moving on into the breaking news, we were able to see that inside the city of Moscow, something really fun happened today. One of the larger oil refineries within the Moscow city area ended up getting hit by some Ukrainian drones, and it appears that the damage was fairly significant. Check it out. We can hear small arms fire as we watch the drone making its way on over to the refinery. And look at it go.
Flying uninterrupted, Bliat, just straight through the airspace. No AD, no nothing. What's air defense doing?
Oh, it's trying something, but I think the machine gun fire is not going to do much.
That's apparently all they've got at this point, is the machine gun fire on this massive power plant.
I think so. I would have to agree. Looks like air defense is not really doing that well, but
Падай.
there goes the drone right down to the refinery.
На нахуй.
Oh, and right onto a tower.
Ебало.
One Mississippi. Oh, there we go.
Right.
There's the explosion right there.
Пиздец нахуй. Газ загорелась, да?
When you see the smoke rising off of the plant right there, but once again giving us a very clear look that this oil refinery was smacked pretty hard. We were able to get another clip here, part 2 of the hit. This one was taken from a commie block in the city morning, basking in the early sunlight in the city of Moscow, the beautiful, glorious city of Moscow, the great home and capital of the Ruski Mir. This citizen looked down into the distance at the refinery and then saw that there was actually the rising of 2 suns, the real sun and the Ukrainian sun on that power plant. I mean, sorry, the refinery. Oh, little car alarm going off right there. Call that the early morning bird chirping. We got the McDonald's fryer going off now as well as the drone continues to make it towards the refinery. The slide whistle is now engaged as well. It's really getting serious here. And we can see...
Oh, блядь, we're living loose. It's not bad, cameraman.
Dude, the cameraman gets easily distracted. He's like, oh my god, the refinery's about to get blown. Squirrel! Oh my god! Like, it's like... Any second now, we're about to see that explosion here. Oh! Dead on the nail. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. 3 Mississippi. 4 Mississippi. Oh!
Jeez.
5 seconds away.
They don't call this channel Nova Plus for nothing. We just saw a Nova.
Man, this is like Amazon Plus, or something like that. I mean, dang, impressive.
Also, Bullseye Bob said in the live chat, is this the same refinery that Russia issued an evacuation order for several days ago?
We don't think so. This was apparently in the Moscow city area. The other one that had an evacuation order issued was somewhere up in the northern region around Tver, which is just north of Moscow, but significantly enough that it's not in the same region. So apparently this is a different power plant that was probably staffed and fully employed at the time of the hit. We also got to see another clip, a third bit of footage of this hit. This is from the Russian highway workers. Yeba! This guy sounded like something else was going on. Let's just hear him one more time. Yeba! It's like, I don't know what this guy's doing, but I think he's relieving himself in the public area. Call that public indecency.
I think in Russia it might be called public decency.
Yep. But there goes the drone.
That's pretty neat.
Rifle fire just cracking right overhead. All of it missing.
Were those the oil workers, by the way, on the street? Who was that?
I don't think it's the oil workers because the refinery's a good bit of ways. I think they're highway workers. Workers of the highway.
AK fire sounds like it's coming from the highway workers or something.
Man, those highway workers gotta be strapped, you know? It's a dangerous place out there on the Russian highway. Oh!
Yeah.
Ничего себе. Meanwhile, we can hear the sounds of yellow rain in the background on the road. Listen to that. Someone back there's pissing like a racehorse watching this. I would have to say they probably are quite scared because not only did that refinery get hit with a pretty significant amount of damage caused to one of the refining elements, we were able to see that further north and in the area of Konakovo, things did not go that well up here either. And we documented this a lot because it happened while we were live on air last night. But the power plant at Konakovo is a fairly significant one. It's the largest of its kind in central Russia, the 6th largest in the entirety of the Russian Federation, and provides more power than the Kursk nuclear power plant does with 4 operating nuclear reactors of the RBMK variant. This is a fairly interesting thing to see, that this power plant was hit, and also the implications of such a hit could be large, as this could start to massively deprive the surrounding area of available power, possibly forcing rolling blackouts onto certain regions that this power plant provided electricity to. But we can see the aftermath here. We can hear in this clip for now, the power plant is still in operation, but it looks as though there was some decent damage caused outside for sure. So this is something we'll have to be waiting and seeing how it really goes. Is the damage really significant? Is this power plant going to go offline? Is it only going to go partially offline? What is it going to be doing? But one thing I can say is that the Lee Spring Army isn't going partially offline, as James Hughes just threw in a $200 donation to the fundraiser, bringing us up to $1,600. I'd be danged, man. That's freaking crazy right there, and I love to see it. But still, good to know that the Ukrainians are conducting a very successful drone operation around the area of Moscow and inflicting some significant damage and losses onto the Russians, at least infrastructure-wise, in this area. Moving on out of Moscow, though, there's a lot more to be talked about with the Ukrainian drone effort. For example, down near Shakti, the oil depots that were hit down here appear to have finally fizzled out, the fire, at least that is, because we were able to get some satellite footage today showing that there really isn't an ongoing fire anymore. If there is, it's incredibly small, but it appears that out of all of our tanks, around 8 of them were knocked out of the let's see, 8, 16, 24, 32. Out of the 32 tanks that are here, around 8 of them got knocked out, with an additional 4 of them getting singed a little bit. But this is giving us a fairly good picture that a decent amount of the usable fuel inside of this depot was severely damaged or completely destroyed in the fire, and this means that once again there's going to be less available fuel resources to be called upon by the Russian Federation in this area in the future. Once again reminding us that the Russians are running a little bit low on the lifeblood of the Russian Federation, usable fuel products. From what we understand, Russia is still running out of usable fuel products. We don't know when they will hit rock bottom at a very good or on a very good time window at this point. But one thing we can say for certain is that they're not doing that well. And it appears that they are continuing to take a pretty significant amount of damage as they continue to try and wage this war. The Proletarsk oil depot was pretty much completely destroyed. Very few of their original tanks remain within that fuel depot, and it appears that out of that fuel depot, a decent amount of them have also been completely destroyed as well, with others possibly being damaged and rupturing leaks, or maybe having some structural integrity issues going on in the future, making those silos unusable. Ukraine's drone attacks are continuing to ensure that the Russian Federation is largely on the back foot, at least inside of their own country, as their inadequate air defense, combined with the amount of damage that these inexpensive drones are able to inflict, is once again making sure that Russia materially does not really have a good footing to continue war on. While the Russians may have a decent amount of manpower to draw on, resources are really where the Russians are going to start falling short. They do not have the industrial manpower, or not the industrial manpower, but the industrial abilities that were seen during the Second World War at this point. They also do not have the ability to produce refined components of warfighting vehicles like main battle tanks and others to be able to keep this conflict going. And so for these reasons, we do know that as they run out of these resources, the war is going to start naturally grinding to an end quicker and quicker as time keeps passing by. We'll also be waiting to see what kind of impact the Konakovo power plant being hit and damaged will have on the surrounding area. If the power plant has to go partially offline or completely offline at any point, we are going to be assuming that a large area is going to be going into rolling blackouts in central Russia, as they will no longer have the power required to be able to keep the entire grid operational. And so for this reason, I think that we'll be seeing that things will not be that well in Russia during this winter, most likely, in my opinion. But nevertheless, a lot of people have been talking about Ukraine hitting the oil refinery and the thermal plant and what Russia's response may be. And a lot of people are wondering, will Russia now ramp up civilian attacks against Ukrainian civilians throughout the entirety of the state of Ukraine? And a lot of people seem to be believing that they probably will. But Matthew, what are people really thinking about this, and what are you thinking about? Do you think they're going to retaliate in this form, or not so much?
All right, so after we've seen some of Russia's largest power plants and power infrastructure get hit by the Ukrainian drone attack, the massive one which occurred last night, the big question is, will Russia ramp up civilian attacks? 67% said yes, they will ramp them up, 21% said Russia will continue as normal, and 7% said probably so, but I need more info. And sadly, I believe that I'm with the 67%. I think Russia will try to take this out on the civilian population of Ukraine. Of course, they're already doing that day in and day out, but I think they're going to ramp that up to try to get even, which is a very sick thing to do, but that's pretty much status quo for the Russians. We're already seeing that in some limited form right now. In fact, I'm looking at an article right here on Twitter right now that says a Russian missile struck a Ukrainian orphanage in Sumy. And that's not all. There's other things happening as well. So it looks like Russia is once again ramping up their war crimes right in the open for the public to see in response to these attacks. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say they're probably going to start conducting more attacks against Ukrainian civilians. As a response to this, it always is the case that they do something like that. They are already conducting that at the moment inside the area around Kharkiv and also in Sumy. We actually have a little bit to cover on that here in a minute. But I would say that they certainly are starting to ramp up these attacks a little bit more, at least recently, and they're trying to make sure to take out their anger and frustrations onto the innocent civilians inside of Ukraine, which is, of course, a war crime, and not only that, it is very wrong just on a moral level. I think that's a fairly straightforward thing to say. I don't really think many people could argue about that. But anyways, moving on from that and on into the next bit of news that we have inside the Kursk Oblast, we have been able to see that things down here have been progressing in a somewhat interesting way, as Ukraine is continuing to try and fight against the Russian Federation's forces and secure a larger foothold within the Kursk Oblast, and have also tried to continue to deprive the Russian forces south of the Reka Sim of any way to retreat further north, still trapping that 3,000-man brigade somewhere down there in that area. We were able to see some video footage today of the Ukrainians using some GBUs dropped from a MiG-29 to destroy a small complex in this area. They hit it with about 4 GBU-39s, completely leveling the structure, which we can see right here. The first bomb, the second, the third, and then the fourth right there. Pretty amazing stuff, really, to watch.
It's like a movie set almost, the way that was put off so like perfectly, and it exploded just right.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, I have to say. Really, I would...
Michael Bay himself would like that.
Man, Michael Bay is in tears right now. He can't even get that kind of perfection, man. And then J.J. Abrams is trying to figure out how to get a lens flare that's big enough that it'll blind you through a TV screen. But beyond that, we're now moving on into the area of Glishkova, well, at least west of it on the Reka Sim, where I did get to see a new little bridge. They have a new one. Check it out. Look. Boom, right there. They set up a new bridge.
Little rinky-dink bridge. That'll last them for maybe a week until Ukraine can smash that. It's not going to last very long, though. No, it's not going to do it. But also, watch this little, like, horseshoe bend right here. Like, have you noticed that?
This river does look kind of bendy. It's kind of like a bendy straw. But I will have to say this, though, man. This bridge probably will last less than a week. It'll probably last about 2 days, maybe 3 days at the longest. Because so far we've seen that the Ukrainians have been pretty quick to try and knock these bridges out and ensure that there's really no way to use them effectively for the Russians on the southern side of the river. So I'd have to say this thing's probably going to last even less of a time. But we can actually find, due to the unique shape of this river, the exact spot where this was. It's right here, right there in that spot, because you can see the little bend, the horseshoe bend, as Matthew calls it. It does look like a horseshoe. And then we can see that bird, Woodstock, from Charlie Brown, like the thing with the giant nose. Let me go see if I can pull that up for y'all. Woodstock bird, not the festival, but the bird. Yeah, I got it dead on the nail. Yeah, there's that stupid bird right there. Look at it. I bet you he's going to choke on that stupid rock it's about to eat on that plate.
Oh. But that bird. I didn't know which one you're talking about. It kind of does look like it. I don't remember this creature looking like this. That nose is very bulbous, I guess you could say.
Man, I'm telling you what, man, that thing could sniff out drugs from about 70 miles away inside of a yacht. with that kind of nose right there. That thing needs to be thing needs to start working for the DEA right there, because that little feller, that thing's going to be sniffing. I mean, hell, I think this thing might be able to beat, like, Hot Dog Man might start using this thing, man. He gently pulls it out of his pocket on his finger, and he says, "Go, little birdie, go find me some blow," or something like that, and the little bird goes flying.
Jeez, man, that's brutal. Bringing Woodstock into this horrific drama. It's like, poor bird.
Man, well, I mean, you gotta erase the blues somehow, man, because when you're such a bum you can't even work as a carny at a hot dog stand, you got some problems. So you really do. But beyond that, still, the bridge does exist in this area. We're expecting that it will be destroyed really soon, but pretty neat to see that the area that it's in looks kind of like Woodstock the bird with the nose. Also, I see someone calling the bird a commie. I did hear that Senator McCarthy did claim that the bird was a communist. We currently have a House committee investigating those claims right now and seeing if there were any anti-American activities that this bird has conducted. But moving on from that and out of that little bit of news right there, it seems that the Russians in this area are still in a little bit of a tight pickle, a little bit of a tough shape of a sort, and we'll be waiting to see how this goes. We're still seeing that the Ukrainians really aren't advancing all that much in this area. They're kind of holding off. I don't know why, but they're not really moving forward at this point from Komarovka towards Glishkovo to try and cut off the Russians there. But moving on from that and into the area of Sverdlikovo, there we go. We got to see an M88 recovery vehicle on the back of a transport truck while our ears get blasted by that "Hey ya, hey Sokolia" song. But anyways, we can see right here the transport. We can see the M88 loaded onto the back. Not a firecracker, but a whole recovery vehicle. Look at that thing. Marked up with the offensive markings for Kursk, Bliet.
Pretty nice. I love to see it.
Man, it's beautiful.
There's some very tiny wheels on that tractor, oddly enough.
Well, I'd have to say, Matthew, what are you judging it off of size? What's going on here? Let's see here. Those are some small wheels, though, man. You put that on like a wheelbarrow most days. You know what I mean?
Very small, man. So it's just odd. It looks like it's been raised up or something. I don't know what's up with it. It's a neat trailer, though.
Man, gonna pimp my ride. But anyways, with that, very neat to see that little M88 right there. Look at it go. It's doing good work. And moving on from that, we also got to see a couple of more Ukrainian vehicles in the Kursk Oblast, a couple of MRAPs and some others. All right, same song for 921 days in a row. Gotta love it. It's getting oh, is that a crank? Oh, it's an AKS-74U. A legend of a gun right there. They're terrible, really, but they're still really neat. And in America, they are collector's items. Let me show y'all one of these right here. Oh, man. Y'all will know it when you see it. And y'all are about to see it right here. The little crink. Look at it.
That's pretty neat, man. Apparently he's proud of it, too. He flashed it in front of the camera like to let everybody see it.
Man, he flashed that thing in front of the camera and he went brap, brap. But I got to say, I appreciate it. I like to see it. I like to see that they're issuing out some carbines here. Well, this isn't even real. I wouldn't even call this thing a carbine. I'd almost classify it a pistol. But still, really neat to see that they had one of these. We can see him walking by one of their trucks. We can see a Cougar MRAP back there.
The Ukrainians always have a couple of Cougars hanging around, so it's a good problem to have.
They always have a couple of Cougars hanging around, just like the outskirts of Fort Benning in Columbus, Georgia. Oh man, there's a lot out there. Oh man, I'm telling you. But we can see them still wandering around, but still need to see this little convoy in the Kursk Oblast area. But moving on from that and into our next bit of news in this area, we were also able to see that the 225th Brigade was taking some time to hit some Russian cameras while we just hit $2,000 on this fundraiser. Whoa! And we just got up to
That's what I'm talking about.
I'm telling you, man, that's exactly what I'm talking about. We just hit $2,076 on the fundraiser. We are about $924 away from the fundraiser goal right now. Can we do it? Yes, we can. You know what? We're going to do it right now. It is time for the ancient rite that we have not called out, I think, in months, Matthew. It's that time of the night. It is time for order! General order! It is time for a general order. General order number 32 is now in effect. If you have $5 to throw into this fundraiser, throw it in right now. I'm going to be personally throwing in $20 of my own money, my own cash into this fundraiser to lead by example, to put in a 20. You can put in any amount you want. You don't have to put in a 5. You can put in like a 10, a 20. You don't even have to throw any in. But, of course, if you're a part of the Lee Spring Army, you're going to throw in a little extra. Get that thing over the mark. But a general order is now in effect. If you are a part of the Lee Spring Army and you have $5 to throw into the fundraiser, throw it in right now so that way we can go over the top, so that way we can start screaming that we hit the goal here in just a second. But with that, let's get to this clip and watch them knock out this camera as we knock out this fundraiser goal.
And it's flying off the handle already, man. It's going berserk.
Man, it's going crazy. Man, I'm telling you what, we're going to be hitting 3,000. Dang, BC Skyman threw in a 300.
Damn. We got 500 to go, roughly.
Rough.
Oh,
man. Oh, Purple Gerbil threw in 100. Dang, it's going crazy down there. The general order is going ham, and the Lee Spring Army is coming out of the woodwork to finish this thing and send it over the top. Incredible to see. And we're going to be moving on into our last clip, actually, in the Kursk Oblast, where we got to see a destroyed Russian Ural. As a little bit of a treat while we hit that $3,000 goal. And look at this right here. This burning Ural. It's something nice to see that they were able to knock this thing out. Once again, showing that Russian supply trucks in this area are having a little bit of a tougher time getting around, and looks like they're susceptible to being damaged or hurt a good bit. But still, we like to see it. Love to know that the Ukrainians are continuing to inflict some pretty significant losses and casualties on the Russian forces in this area. And from what we can tell, it looks as though that the Ukrainians will be slowing down their offensive tempo here soon. They're meeting some significant Russian resistance in the Koronivo and Bolshoi-Soldatskoy fronts, and for this reason, we're seeing that they're starting to make very, very slow advances on a day-to-day basis. We're expecting that they're probably going to clear out...
Wait, we just smashed the goal!
Oh, we did it! Goal!
That's what I'm talking about. Smash that goal about the 3.1 thousand raise at the $3,000 goal. Another a successful fundraising. I must say, it's good to see.
And it is wonderful to see. It is absolutely beautiful. A whopping, hang on, little correction here. $3.4 thousand roughly has been raised in 39 minutes. Absolutely incredible. And crazy to see that we hit the fundraiser goal this early. And so now that we've done that, we can all sit back, relax, take a breather. We did it again. The Lee Spring Army has once again blown through another goal, and the Lee Spring Army has remained undefeated in its streak. Through the entirety of the war, we have never missed a fundraiser goal, period. And that is absolutely incredible to see, and we love to know that we continue to knock it out of the park like that every single weekend with all of y'all here in the LSA. So a huge shout out to y'all once again. Absolutely incredible stuff. And of course, put an LSA in the chat if you were proud of hitting that $3,000 goal. As Hal Rose throws in a 333 and gets us up to $3.8 thousand. We're now about $800 above the goal.
That is tremendous, man. Tremendous to see.
Tremendous. But moving on from that, and that huge shout out right there to the entirety of the LSA, and the LSAs are flooding in now in the chat. I mean, absolutely beautiful to see it. Love to see it. It does seem as though the offensive tempo in this area is going to be slowing down. We are still expecting that eventually Ukraine will control the entire area south of Rekha-Sem, but for now that doesn't appear to be happening anytime soon, and it appears that they're going to be cautiously advancing in this area. But still, absolutely wonderful to see that this offensive was able to achieve some very large goals and objectives at this point, and hopefully we'll see that they continue on in gaining a little bit of ground here and there and tying up a lot of Russian forces in the Kursk Oblast instead of allowing them to be diverted into Ukraine where they could be used elsewhere. But moving on from that and into the Sumy area around the city of Sumy, we were also able to see something fairly interesting down here. Russia ended up targeting a convoy of agricultural trucks, grain trucks, that were queuing to load soybeans in the Kursk region. They ended up slamming them with a Iskander missile. This ended up being a fairly big event. There's a lot of big events that are going on right now in terms of atrocities that the Russians are committing. We usually don't show a lot of those on YouTube because for some reason YouTube doesn't really like us showing them much, but we can show this one because it was in infrared, so there's not really a lot to see, but you can see the Iskander coming in and hitting this little column of soybean trucks, but we can see the Iskander right there slamming into the street and hitting that convoy. it's pretty sad to see something like this, considering that the Ukrainian agricultural sector has been going through a lot lately, and now we can see that the Russians are starting to target them as well. It is a very unfortunate thing, but we can see one of the people here who survived the attack showing what happened, and we can see the soybean trucks here heavily damaged, some of them completely destroyed from the explosion. And literally hit exactly where they were sitting, waiting to load up a ton of soy and then get on their way out to try and send it somewhere else so that it could be sold off onto the market. You see them here continuing to talk about it. It's very unfortunate to see stuff like this. Once again, Ukrainian citizenry across the board, whether they're living in the cities or working out in the countryside, continue to be attacked by the Russian Federation as they pretty much enact a regime of terror against the Ukrainian populace, trying to break them just through attacks against anyone and everyone that they can find, or anyone or everyone who was within reach of their missiles. It's so sad to see this kind of stuff, and it's terrible to think that Ukrainian citizens pretty much have to live in fear everywhere they go every single day, being a possible Russian target. And on top of that, we're now starting to hear that not only is this in kind of the Ukrainian sphere, it's also starting to extend once again into the international sphere as Russia starts running their mouth again. Russia has said it will change its nuclear doctrine based on recent actions from the West. And a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts on this. Now, this is a question that we just asked you all a moment ago, but coming off of the cusp of the Russians starting to conduct pretty much a campaign of terror against the Ukrainian people with their drone and missile attacks, it seems to be a prudent question and a prudent topic that they're starting to try and threaten the West with even larger weapons, nuclear weapons, and make it seem that we'll also be under the same form of terror that the Ukrainian citizenry is under. And some people are saying that it's purely Russian saber-rattling. Others are saying that it seems like a half-hearted threat. Some people are saying that this is a real threat and very concerning, and some are undecided and unsure. While I am absolutely out of caffeine and I can hardly talk because I'm that tired, but still, what are people thinking, Matthew, and what are you thinking?
All right, so this is actually not the first time we've heard of this. About 3 or 4 days ago, we did hear the Russians say that they were going to rethink their nuclear doctrine, and now we have confirmation that they quote-unquote will change their nuclear doctrine based on recent actions from the West. So we didn't get any clarification on what that means. It was very vague and just very sort of nonsensical, to be perfectly honest. So 69% said it's purely Russian saber-rattling, while 16% said it seems like a half-hearted threat, and 9% said it seems like a real threat to the West. And on this one, I'm not sure really what the options are here. I think Russia typically has a defensive nuclear doctrine. I believe that's what they had as a status quo. If they're changing it to an offensive doctrine, if that is the case, they're not going to start suddenly launching nukes at the West just because they've suddenly changed the doctrine. So, but pretty clearly to me, it's saber rattling. It's more of the same thing. This is Russia's fallback position, is to immediately start talking about nuclear weapons the moment something starts going wrong, because that's all they have really to rest on is the nukes. And even at that, they can't just start firing them because that would mean the destruction of Russia itself. So Russia's once again just running off of the mouth. It really means nothing, but they are saying this. So I'm with the 69%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, in my opinion, this is nothing more than saber-rattling. The Russians are pretty idiotic. They're incredibly incompetent, poorly trained, poorly equipped. They're not a force to be reckoned with at all. In fact, they're a force to be pushed over and beaten into the ground in reality. If the Russians ever tried to nuke us, they would get nuked pretty significantly in return. They would pretty much be completely destroyed. Not only that, if it wasn't a nuclear exchange and it was just a conventional ground exchange, we would end up ensuring that the Russian generational gap that happened in World War II would look like a sideshow compared to the one that they would get inflicted on them by the West in that kind of a war, because we would decimate their army to the point that they're just keeping an endless stream of conscripts flowing straight from their homes and onto the front lines for slaughter. I would have to say that this is nothing more than a bunch of hype talk from a dying country, from a dying stupid leader, and if they continue on with this kind of talk, we might end up following through with it against them one day, and they'll really learn what a actual modern war looks like, because I think they're still living in the mindset that this is the 80s or the 70s, and this isn't the 80s or the 70s anymore. This is the present day, and we're going to give them a present day ass whipping. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my humble opinion, because I'm not an expert or anything, but one thing I can say is that the Russians are a joke. That I can say in my expert opinion. But with that, I hope that was a pretty good little summary right there, at least person to person there. But with that, it's time for us to talk about something that is fairly big and pretty impressive at that. We have reached a unbelievable $4,500 raised on the fundraiser right now, which is absolutely insane.
Wow.
Like, that's
and also it's even too, man. It's 4,500 even. Oh, now damn, somebody added 5 to it. Messed it up.
Yeah, it's absolutely impressive, though, that they've been able to raise $4,500 as the combined Lee Spring Army. I am so sorry, everyone, if I sound tired right now, because I did not have coffee. I tried to have an espresso. That is hardly enough caffeine. I'm almost literally passing out right now during the stream. So I'm actually going to have to see if I can get something done in the meantime to try and get some more caffeine in my system, so that way I can actually run this thing, because I'm not going to be able to do this for much longer in this shape. But Matthew, in the meantime, please shout out the top donors, because there's been a lot of people who came together to make this thing possible tonight. So who are the top donors that we are able to call out?
All right, so like we said, we're now up to $4,535 raised of the original $3,000 goal, which is tremendous to see, and huge shout out to the LSA for getting us up to that fantastic number right there, almost up to 5,000, getting close to it. But with that, our biggest donor of the night thus far is Hal Rose, who threw in that $333 donation, and a huge shout out to Hal for that massive support on the fundraiser as normal. And also we had a $300 from BC Skyman, another channel legend, also massive fundraiser support. And then we had a $225 from Andy L, as well as a $200 from James Hughes, as well as a $125 from AJ, as well as Tom S. And then we had a $100 from some guy called the Enforcer, who likes to hang around quite a bit around the channel. And then we have a $100 from Purple Gerbil, as well as Old Warrior, Hal Rose, once again, as well as Purple Gerbil once again as well. And then we had one from Just Chillin', John C., Gene Kustra. And then we had a $50 from Gordon Peterson, Saul Rivera, Greg Carrier, Randall Jones, as well as Diva369, Dad Good, Sharon Flynn, Randy Tosto, as well as the Mr. Anderson and Richard McGurl. And once again, huge shout out to everybody tonight, even if we were not able to call you off. Huge shout out for donating, because of course, it's an excellent cause. It's Nova, Ukraine, and they do tremendous work inside of Ukraine. So a huge shout out to everybody for raising that tremendous amount of money for Ukraine. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say a huge shout out to everyone who has been supporting tonight. It's been absolutely incredible to see that we've been able to raise $4,500 for Nova Ukraine, which is an amazing nonprofit which has done incredible work inside of the state of Ukraine so far. I got to say that's also incredible to know that everyone banded together. Not only the top donors that we were able to call out, but the folks we were not able to call out. Every single one of y'all was able to fundraise to make this grand total possible, and for that we're incredibly appreciative and massively grateful to know that the Lee Spring Army continues to excel each and every day in surpassing fundraiser goals and continuing to help out the people that we actually cover news on. That is something that not a lot of channels really get to do that much. Some of them do it sometimes, intermittently. We're the only channel, I think, that does this weekly every single Sunday and makes it an effort to do so. And it's really crazy to see that everyone can band together and do amazing things here in the Lee Spring Army, time and time again, to help out those people over there. Y'all have amazing hearts of gold, massive ones at that, and I know that it's not falling on deaf ears, the kind of support and help that y'all give to these nonprofits. It may seem like that on this channel because we really don't get a shout out for doing this, and none of y'all really get a shout out for doing it either, but I know that the folks who are actually being supported over there and helped out by the fundraising efforts that this channel has done are certainly very happy and very proud that the Lee Spring Army continues to have an eye out for them and continues to help them out with really existing at all. And so with that, a big thanks to y'all once again. I hope that does give a huge round of applause. Big thanks to each and every one of y'all for making this possible tonight, helping out once again, because if it was not for folks like y'all, we would not be able to make this thing a reality, and we would not be able to fundraise and support amazing nonprofits like we have tonight. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. But before we move on even from this, we have to make sure to address a couple of questions because we do have some fairly interesting questions tonight, and there's always interesting things to be had in questions. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so to grab our first question of the night, we have one from Pak. I said, do you think that Ukraine will get long-range permission? They really need it.
I'm not really sure if they will. The United States seems to be kind of waffling around on that, along with a lot of other major Western countries that have provided weapon systems. To be entirely honest, I would assume, because the U.S. government at the moment seems to largely be in a mindset of constantly de-escalate at all costs, do not try and push anyone's buttons, even if you can push them and really get away with them. Don't try and push any buttons. And so we may see that the United States does not give approval to Ukraine to use long-range weapons inside of Russia for quite some time at this point. It may be a different story in other countries. Germany will probably never happen, in my opinion, because they're even reluctant to give the Taurus, which is their long-range missile, to Ukraine for them to use. So it's highly unlikely that they ever will give that kind of permission. The United Kingdom probably will be one of the countries to give the permission first. They're usually the trendsetter when it comes to providing support for countries in this area of the world, really in the Western world as a whole. And so for that reason, we may see that they eventually give approval for the Storm Shadow to be used deep behind Russian lines inside of the Russian Federation. France may also be close to follow as well, or may actually beat the British to the cake, considering that the British and the French use the exact same missile, just under a different name. We would largely assume that they will be providing some kind of approval for the Scalp EG missile to be used and fired into the Russian Federation as well. So that would generally be what I'm assuming right now about Western partners providing approval for Western weaponry to be fired deep into the Russian Federation. The United States would probably be last to the punch. The Germans would never make it to the punch, and the British and the French are kind of competing for first and second place right now on who might really give that approval. But if I had to pick in between those two, it most likely, if not always, will be the United Kingdom that gives that approval first, because historically throughout the entire war they have been the one to give it first. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question here from the live chat is going to go to, let's see here, it's going to go to Volinger, who says, do you think that Ukraine will go around Koronivo instead of through it due to an apparent stalemate?
And can you reread that one again really quickly, Matthew?
They said, do you think that Ukraine will go around Koronivo instead of through it due to an apparent stalemate?
Sadly, I don't really think that would be an option given the terrain and the environment that we're seeing around Koronivo at the moment. Koronivo is in a little bit of a tough spot geographically. It's surrounded by swamps and marsh to its western side, making an advance in this area fairly difficult considering that the terrain is not conducive to support any kind of heavier armored vehicles or any armored vehicles at all for that matter, meaning that this advance would have to be dismounted infantry within this area. That would pose a great deal of difficulty. Russian artillery would very easily be able to repulse these troops without any kind of armored support, and so it would be fairly difficult to fight a battle in this area and have it succeed. Not only that, there's a choke point here, considering that the city and the river pretty much create a funnel in this area. It would pretty much be a killing field, and so for this reason, the Russians would probably be able to hold a pretty significant defense of the western flank of Koronivo, which we've been seeing so far. However, on the eastern flank, it's a little bit of a different story. While there are some bottlenecks in this area around Vitrino and also some in Dorovka, with the lakes that are in this area, it is a much wider and more open area. And for this reason, the Ukrainians will be able to try and make some sort of advances and possibly swing around Koronivo through the fields and try and cut off the Russians' highway that leads from Koronivo and up to Rilisk. This still ends up being a little bit more difficult, considering that the Russians aren't having to focus a lot of forces onto the western flank of the town due to the bad geography of that area. Most of the Russian forces are actually focused around Alexandrovka and Koronivo and somewhere in between, meaning that the Ukrainians are really meeting a head-on force here in having to try and punch straight through some of Russia's strongest defenses in this area. For that reason, I would have to say maneuvering around Koronivo does not really seem to be an option at the moment. Now, you could try and swing out even further from somewhere in the Kromsky-Bicky direction and then start moving over this way towards Koronivo, but at that point, the sweeping maneuver is so large, the Russians will have a large amount of time, or a lot of time, to be able to prepare defensive positions, to be able to try and stop and hold back the Ukrainians in that area from that maneuver. And so once again, you're kind of getting bogged down around the Koronivo area once again, and there really is no good way to try and outmaneuver the Russians in this area or outflank them, and then end up securing a maneuver victory by threatening to cut off Koronivo's route of retreat. So I would have to say that, in my opinion, does not really seem like it would be easy to go around Koronivo. In my opinion, I'd also have to say Koronivo is going to be a pretty much brutal street fighting kind of a battle. There's really no other way to get through this one than literally just going straight through the town. There's really no way to achieve a maneuver victory in this area. So the Ukrainians and the Russians ought to be ready to pretty much decimate the city, level it to the ground, and then one side will end up winning, or the other will end up holding it successfully, and then the Ukrainians will have to figure out something else from there. But one thing is for certain, if the Ukrainians were about to dig in, they do control Koronivo, not Koronivo. There are two Koronivos here, believe it or not. They're side by side. This is Koronivo village, which is what Ukraine currently controls, and then this is Koronivo town, which the Russians control. They're currently divided at the Reka Krepna, which is the river Krepna, because Reka in Russian means river. Thank you to whoever told me that. I can't think of your name right now, but you did share some invaluable knowledge with me right there about the names of these rivers. Beyond that, however, this is where the current zones of control are, and the Ukrainians, much like the Russians are right now, will be able to create a pretty strong defensive within the village of Koronivo and ensure that the Russians could never counterattack them and easily uproot them and push them out of that area. So, in my opinion, I would say maybe not a maneuver victory, maybe a slog, and if the slog doesn't end up working out, stalemate, build up a pretty decent amount of fortifications in Koronivo village, and then just hold this area for as long as you possibly can. That would probably be the best thing for Ukraine to do at this point, given the kind of picture that we're getting, one or the other. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion, and how I'm seeing the battle unfolding in that area right now. But with that, we are now on to our last question of this little segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of our news. So, what is our final question of this segment, Matthew?
All right, so the final question of the first question segment is going to go to Judy, who says, do you think that if Ukraine takes the city of Moscow, that it would end the war?
That is an interesting question. Would it end the war? I'm not really sure if it would. Because the Russian government can move, much like the Ukrainian government can move as well. For example, in World War II, when the Battle of France was happening and the French ended up conducting pretty much Schleifenplan 2.0, going through Belgium again to invade France, they ended up taking over Paris. Everyone knows that. It's kind of like a common knowledge thing of World War II. But the thing is that while the city of Paris was captured, the French government actually ended up still effecting a pretty decent amount of resistance, at least for a short while after, until they effected a surrender with the German government, pretty much ceding a large amount of northern France to Nazi Germany, and then creating a puppet state in the south. Its capital was in the city of Lyon, called Vichy France, which was a fascist puppet state of Nazi Germany that ended up kind of fighting with the Nazis for a while, but not really fighting so much. They really just ended up providing a lot of slave labor, and also ended up doing some really goofy, stupid things. The Free French, however, which ended up pretty much operating out of North Africa at this point, was a continuation of French resistance, and they ended up creating their own Free French government, among many other things, largely spearheaded by Charles de Gaulle, and they ended up continuing on the war until 1945 as Free France. So technically, if you lose your capital, it doesn't mean that the war is necessarily over. So the Russians could continue on the war even if Moscow was captured. It would just be a massive morale loss for the Russians, and at that point, public willpower and hope of continuing on the war and winning would probably cease to exist, but it probably wouldn't ever come to that. The Ukrainians would have a very low chance of ever making it to Moscow and capturing the city, in my opinion, so best to kind of look at that for what it is. It's not really ever going to result in anything, and even if they were able to do that somehow, that would be pretty wild. It would be a pretty highly unlikely chance if that did happen. But while I try and sip the last sip of an espresso right there, that was so kindly brought to me, thank the Lord. Hopefully that will help me to kind of get out of this this non-caffeinated phase I'm in at the moment. Still, it seems as though that would be the case to me. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And let's see. Also, Mandy, I saw you say hot dogs, man. People in here, yeah. Apparently, the Carney thing was a little bit too much. You know, being called for what he is, which is a bum who can't even hold down a job at a carnival, is a little bit too much. So they're starting to come in droves now. It's like that's the one thing to get him pissed off. It's like technically we can't even call the guy the hot dog man anymore because he's not even a hot dog man. He's just a bum now. He's the bum dog man. Like I don't even know what the hell to call him anymore.
And also, of all nights they could come in and try to disrupt something, why come in and disrupt it on the one night that we raise money for Ukraine? It's like, isn't that like counterproductive to the entire cause? If that really is the cause that they're working for as well, why come in and stop that? That makes no sense.
Man, I'm telling you, dude, it always gets me a crack, like a good laugh, crack, pun intended, I suppose, because hot dog man usually does get a little crack. But it always gets me to crack up a little bit because they always come in and try and sabotage efforts to help out Ukraine. Like they don't ever, like for some reason they don't ever come in when we're just, you know, running a normal stream and making a living for ourselves. No, they can't do that. They've got to come in and try and actively sabotage an effort to help out Ukrainians and pretty much use Ukrainians as kind of the collateral in their attacks. You know, like let's just see how many Ukrainian citizens we can screw over and ensure Nova Ukraine can't help out because we're going to try and sabotage their fundraising efforts. I think it's sad, me personally. I'm sure many of y'all also think that's a sad way to think as well. But once again, showing that the hot dog man community is about as anti-Ukrainian and self-absorbed as they can get. As real scumbags through and through. And now we can't even call him the hot dog man. In case y'all didn't know, Hot Dog Man, which is the nickname we've given to a YouTube channel that's harassed us and viewers for years now, apparently that guy quit his job at the county fair in Minnesota as the hot dog man selling hot dogs because he said it was too much work. How does that work out? I don't know. I mean, I've worked in a concession stand before myself. It's not that much work. I'll be entirely honest with you. Don't know how in the world that can be too much work for someone. I feel like that may honestly just be a kind of a bum set right there. Like change that mindset to a grind set. My boy over there said change that mindset to a bum set or something because you can't even work at a hot dog stand. And for some reason, this guy cannot work at a hot dog stand. All right, y'all. Literally just too much work for him. All right, the working class is being overworked here in this hot dog stand, cooking up a hot dog and selling it. So he's going to expect you to take him seriously for a news reporter, but the guy hardly even has the work ethic to work at a hot dog stand. And it's like, I want to take my news from someone I know who can actually put in the work in the background, not someone who says it's too much work to cook a hot dog and put it on a bun and give it to someone. That's a little bit sad. But anyways, with that, we are now going to be moving on and into the rest of the news that we have tonight because we still have a lot of exciting, fun news tonight, and the loads of it. Good stuff, as a matter of fact. And we're now going to be moving on into our location unknowns, because we were able to see that Croatia actually ended up providing a new demining vehicle. This thing, it's called the doctrine MV4. It's from Croatia, and it's used to clear landmines and unexploded ordnance, and it's capable of clearing up to 1,500 square meters an hour, which is actually a pretty decent amount. And also it can withstand detonations from mines and stuff. It's a minesweeper, which is kind of made to do that. It looks to me, Matthew, like this thing was built on the chassis of some kind of an agricultural tractor with like the tracks that it has and everything.
It reminds me of probably like a bulldozer chassis or something. It looks like the bottom of a bulldozer and like the front of a stump grinder or something. And also it has that like stump grinder kind of like box in the back of it too. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, it looks cool though. I'll give it that. But interesting to see that it shares a lot of similarities with some kind of like an agricultural tractor. Honestly, not an agricultural tractor. Tracks are pretty bad for that. Or some kind of a bulldozer. Look at that bulldozer. And speaking of Croatia, I got to give a huge shout out to Croatia. Probably the prettiest coastline that we've seen. We actually came here and rabbit holed about this a long time ago. But let me try and show y'all a little bit of this Croatian coastline out here. At least the best that we can find. Here we go. Let me show y'all this. Okay, maybe not. Maybe not. It's fine though. We'll find another picture of it. Maybe right here. Now look at that.
Yeah, that's pretty nice looking. That looks like a good place to take a little short vacation.
Man, that looks like a nice place to take a little dip. I'm not gonna lie. I would go here and take a little dip myself. It's in the Adriatic. Apparently, from what we found out, the Adriatic is actually one of the safest oceans, well, the safest seas in the world, because apparently there are like no shark attacks that happen in the Adriatic. So that's pretty cool. That's compared to Florida, where the most shark attacks anywhere in the world happen. Like half of the shark attacks in the world happen all in Florida, which is kind of wild to me because that's usually where we went swimming. But this place looks gorgeous. I'd take a dip here any day. But of course, big shout out to the Croatians. Not only did they have beautiful, pristine coastline and kind of like just called dibs and screwed Bosnia out of any coastline at all. Like they, like, you know, that's kind of weird with how Croatia's shaped. Like they pretty much just took the entire coastline from Bosnia and just had it for themselves. But I respect it though, because they really do have a beautiful coastline there. And also they have some really beautiful cities, like the city of Split. Which is really neat because this little area right here, within these walls, is actually a former palace of a Roman emperor. So that's pretty cool, actually. Kind of a cool fact. Also, Froggyland. What in the hell?
What the hell is this?
Dude, they got a
This is
court
kinda
of
creepy,
frogs!
I'm not gonna lie. They're out here turning the frogs on.
They're turning the frogs into attorneys. But look at this, dude. What in the world is this? Is this some kind of a... Wait a minute, hang on. What? Wait a minute, there's a description, dude. These two were punished with public humiliation because they had beaten up this poor guy next to them, and now they are fighting each other. Who is more guilty? What?
Two giants are carrying something. Well,
Small princess and an aircraft carrier.
What the hell is this? This is like Crazyville.
In that time, this could be called Jukebox. Oh my goodness. Dude, this is whack. I've never seen anything like this, and this is the building it's in.
Oh,
Huh.
that's definitely a little bit weird. That's a specialty museum instead.
This is a museum for some sort of a sadist or something, dude. You know they tortured these frogs before they went out. Ugh, dude, this is creepy. Wait a minute. Do not miss this opportunity. It is here in Split, verified. Only one in the world. Thank God it's the only one in the world. Froggyland, over 100 years old, unique collection of 507 stuffed frogs displayed in human positions. I think that's the problem. They're in human positions. It's just unnatural and wrong. And yeah,
It's rated Traveler's Choice on... Does that say TripAdvisor?
Where does it say that? Where does it say
Did
that?
they buy that sticker off of eBay or something? You see that sticker on the Froggyland poster?
I think they probably did, man. No way in hell.
I think
this
they bought that from somebody. Like, no way they got TripAdvisor Traveler Award or something like that. There's no way.
But Matthew, my boy in the bottom left here, he's studying, dude. Don't disrupt him.
That's a man.
Yeah, that's a man. Like, that's a man.
That's
Like,
not a frog.
That's no frog. That's a man. But still, dude, this is a little bit bizarre. Maybe not Ukraine war coverage, but I feel like that's something that we needed to cover anyways. It's right outside of the palace that the Roman emperors used to live in. So a little whack, I'd have to say. But anyways, moving on from that, I guess you could call that a froggy hole. You feeling froggy jump. But anyways, moving on from that and out of that little miner right there from Croatia. Great country. A little weird museum, but still a great country. We got to see that the Russians are using some sort of a new mine system. This is a drone mine. This is a fairly new concept in the war. We've never seen either side use something like this before, but apparently how this thing works is that it's some sort of an anti-tank mine or an anti-vehicular mine that's mounted onto a bottom of a drone upside down. This drone then flies towards a road in Ukraine, and then it flips over and it plants itself onto the street, planting the mine with it right side up. So when a vehicle drives over this, if they're not paying attention, they're going to detonate the mine and it's going to blow up under the wheels, causing significant damage to the vehicle, possibly, but I'm not really expecting that much damage. It appears that this mine is on the somewhat smaller side. But apparently, the Russians are starting to use this tactic to try and deploy mines along the roads that are frequented by Ukrainian military vehicles conducting military activities near the line of all kinds. So going off of that, this is interesting and new. This is actually something that's innovational by the Russians. We haven't seen anything like this before from the Ukrainian or the Russian side. So we're going to be trying to figure out if this actually ends up causing any increased Ukrainian casualties. And if it does, we'll probably see the Ukrainians start to use this in return against the Russians if it ends up being an effective way of planting mines onto roads that are frequently used by the Russians. And not only that, these can just show up out of the blue. They're drone delivered. You can just see the drone sitting right under it, planted onto the road. So these things will pop up literally right after you get done driving across the road. And when you're driving back, the road could be littered with these mines. So pretty ingenious, I'm not going to lie. Like, this is actually an interesting concept here. But we'll see how it ends up panning out. Seems like the Ukrainians found that one, though, and it didn't blow anyone up. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a rare instance of a brimstone being used on the Russians. This is actually very rare footage. We rarely ever get to see the brimstone in action. And there goes the brimstone, like a bat out of hell. And it's starting to slam the Russian positions out there in the woods. Oh! And we see
look, somebody's just casually walking away.
Man, they were just like, man, screw it. Like, they just start walking off.
Whoever did this logo, this watermark, jumping around like the DVD symbol, these damn people need help.
They really do. Also, Matthew, while the Hot Dog Man's people continue to come in and try and make stupid comments, big shout out to Hot Dog Man channel, losing another 100 subscribers again. Keep it up. Hopefully we can hit another 100 lost here really soon. But anyway, so you can see them continuing to hit more Russian vehicles in the area.
Just lost another 100. Hey, let's go!
Another 100. And look at this. They're setting up that wolf. But still, nice to see. Good to know that they were knocking out some Russian vehicles here and there in the unknown areas. But moving on from that and into our next bit of news, we also got to see the Russian casualty report in full color.
Damn, they got 14 Bobcats today. That's crazy, man. Well, look at that. 9 away from 3,000 Bobcats destroyed. It's almost too good to be true. We're going to hit that before we go on the vacation, of all things. That means we're going to celebrate that when it happens. It might happen tomorrow, actually.
And we won't be on air tomorrow.
Damn.
But you'll be able to make a video tomorrow.
That's right. I don't know if there's enough topic on a Bobcat to make a video, but I could attempt to make it.
Dude, just send it, man. Just see how it goes, man. But this is a great way to start off the month, Matthew. This is an incredible way to start off the month. 1,350 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, once again showing the Ukrainian armed forces is fighting incredibly hard to hold their ground. Not only that, 24 APCs were destroyed, along with 56 supply trucks, 10 main battle tanks, 22 artillery pieces, 36 drones, and 14 Bobcat skid steers. It was an incredibly good day, and it appears that the Russians are having a very rough time keeping people around. Seems as though a lot of them are ending up getting put out of the war a little early. We also had the return of Alan Watts over here in the comments section saying some really goofy stuff. It's probably some of the dumbest takes I've ever seen outside of the Hot Dog Man's takes, which are pretty dumb. The only thing he takes is crack. But still, nice to see that the losses are this high, and good to see that the Ukrainians are still conducting a very successful defensive operation. Moving on from that and over into the area of Vovchansk, we also got to see some interesting activity happening in this area, a little bit higher, at least in video and picture evidence, than we've seen in prior days and weeks. We were able to see a little bit of the firefights happening outside of Lipsy, filmed by a Ukrainian soldier. This was actually in the spring of 2024, but this is the first time we've ever seen this footage, so we're going to be showing it to y'all right now. Alright, Chad music ensues. But we see them laying down that heat on the Russians right when this offensive began, you see.
You know, Chad music is actually pretty simple to make. It's a simple formula. You just have to garble some words that sound pretty manly at the beginning, like, hit him on the left, hit him on the right, and then go, hit the bass on it.
Nah, man, better yet, man, you just literally take any line of like, speech, and you just, like, really lower the bass on it, and, you know, make it a lot deeper sounding. It could be something like, I have to use a bathroom. Boom, boom, boom. You know, it's like some stupid crap like that. It's the most brain dead kind of music I've ever heard. I'm not gonna lie.
If they put some symphonic music over it, we would gain 5 IQ points while watching this footage.
Yeah, we would. It would be like Fallout. You know, you read the little books and you gain like a skill point or something, but instead you just get brain rot like from the music. And everyone uses the same music, by the way. Because interestingly enough, the Russians use the same dog water music too. So I don't know what it is. It's just like a trend that everyone wants to use this kind of music, and it's just not good. It's just not good at all.
We had a bot come in and say, "You two are biased fools for the $sign, subservient to pro-West YouTube filters." I responded back to the guy and said, "But you're a band fool." Touche.
Man, better yet, man, this is what that guy came in. You are nothing but a slave to the dollar and your capitalist overlords. You should overthrow them and install a whacking republic of the whacking people, or something like that. It's like, okay, you commie. It's like, cool. Anyways, moving on.
It's like how are we after the $sign when we literally make $0 today? We're doing this just for the Ukrainians. How is that at chasing the dollar? It makes no sense, man. These bots are losing it.
I'm telling you, man, they really are losing it. Oh my goodness, dude. It doesn't make any sense. We're the only people on the internet who do anything that, from what I understand, that's free. Like, we don't, we tonight have not made a single dime, like, on the stream. You know what? I'll show y'all that. I'll show y'all that right here, because I actually have the proof. It's the control room. Chat revenue, boom. It's non-existent. There's not even any to be registered. We don't make a single cent running the stream tonight, and yet I still end up putting in like 8 hours of work, putting together the stream, and then running it, and then doing stuff afterwards, every single day to run this thing on every single Sunday. We don't make a dime on this day. It's like if we were actually slaves to the dollar, I feel like we would probably be making $1 tonight, and we're not. So, bots dispelled. Seethe and cope and cry and piss yourselves or whatever y'all do. But moving on from that, we did get to see the Russian forces being filmed by the 3rd Brigade. Okay. Well, we can see it's a tour.
Oh, look, on the run. Man on the run.
That's it, not on the run anymore. And we see them getting another one. Oh!
I always hate it when the drone loses signal right before it hits. We get robbed of the moment of truth.
Yeah, but we always get to see a second drone, a witness. I think they just bring out the witnesses to confirm that they're hitting the stuff. Still pretty cool, though.
No witnesses.
Man, we're going to have to stop showing United 24 clips, man, because this is the... I just got an email. This is like the 3rd time that we've shown something of theirs, and they ended up using non-licensed copyright music, and we get copyrighted for it. Like, I'm getting really annoyed with that because they want people to show their clips, but then we show them, and then we get content ID'd, and I'm like, well, what's the point of that? But anyways...
I don't understand that, man. It's like they want the videos to get out to the most people, but yet they keep putting the copyrighted stuff in it. It makes no sense. Like, because they know the only place you can show it to an audience is YouTube. So it's like, you know, YouTube has one of the best content ID systems out there. Like, it snuffs out everything that's copyrighted, so there's no getting around it.
Yeah, it's like, geez. Also, Aussie Green Skull, I didn't donate 20. I actually donated 120. $100 donation at the very beginning of the stream, like in the first 2 minutes, and then another $20 donation during the general order. So actually, yeah, I am taking a net loss. I am going to show this United 24 clip, but if there's any music in it, it's getting muted immediately. Just letting y'all know that. We see them getting out of the APC, immediately starting the firefight. See him loading the machine gun here. Dang, Fachada threw in a $200 donation to Nova Ukraine. Goodness gracious.
Dang.
See him moving forward.
Радик, за мною! Иду! Почекай, почекай!
And I'm seeing a couple of people saying we saw this the other day. Did we?
I don't think so.
Interesting. A lot of people are actually saying that we saw this the other day. Yep, it looks like everyone's saying it now. Sorry, everyone, I thought this was new. I don't remember watching this before, but apparently we did. Anyways, moving on from that and into another area around Vovchansk, we did get to see a grad, a BM-21 grad of the Russian Armed Forces getting absolutely spattered. Here we go. And we can see the grad right there. And Nemesis said, enforcer, in enforcement, what is a copyright? Well, not a copyright strike, it's a content ID. They're two different things. A copyright strike is where YouTube ends up punishing you for something because it was a very severe infringement. Content ID is when you ended up playing something that you didn't have the license for, and then you end up getting content ID'd for it. It doesn't mean anything for us, considering we're non-monetized on the live streams. It doesn't actually have an impact at all, but it does have an impact in the term of our no ads promise that we give y'all, because we always say there are no ads and no sponsors on these streams, and that's true because we never run them. But whenever we get content ID'd and there's any kind of copyrighted material in one of our live streams, the content ID automatically turns ads on to that stream, and that means every time y'all click on it, y'all will see an ad that we did not want to run, we didn't consent to run, but because the stream was content ID'd, it runs ads. So at that point, we then are having people coming to us going, "Hey, wait a minute, you said there was going to be no ads, what the hell's going on? There's ads," and you know, we can't control it at that point. And that's why we make sure to not play copyrighted music or anything like that, for that matter, in any of our clips, because we don't want the content ID to constantly be coming down on us and having ads running on this thing. It's supposed to be ad-free and sponsor-free through and through, and that's kind of why it ends up bugging me a lot when that happens, because we are trying our best to make sure that this is ad-free and sponsor-free 100% of the time, and then because of content ID, we can't guarantee that 100% of the time because some other third party ends up running ads on our streams. So, you know, that's kind of the...
You know what we can guarantee 100% of the time is the LSA always smashes the fundraiser, and we just hit $5,000 raised, $2,000 above the goal of $3,000. Tremendous to see. Tom Exman was actually the one that took us over with an $8 donation right over the $5,000 mark. Huge shout out to everyone. And also, we got some big donors that will call off at the end of the stream as well. But $5,000, I love to see it.
And I got to say, that is pretty impressive. I love to see it. And it's wonderful to know that we are now $2,000 above tonight's fundraiser goal. That is absolutely incredible, and we love to see it. But moving on from that, and down into the area of Kislivka, we got to see a little bit of a Ukrainian unit rotation. And we're going to be muting that. But we can see them hopping out of the back of the car. Look at him. Holding that AK. That AK's got a custom stock right there. Really nice. And also, Juana McIntosh said, does that mean if you erase the offending audio, it's no longer content ID? Technically, yes. The problem with that, though, is that to edit that specific segment out of a stream, it takes YouTube about 5 hours on my computer to upload the download file, or like the file for the stream, because it's so long. And then it takes an additional 8 hours for it to be able to actually clip it out in YouTube's system. So to do that, it would take up an entire day, an entire working day, where I can't do anything else on my computer, because I have to keep that window open and running, and if I try to do anything else, for some reason the process fails. So then we end up just having to take the content ID and run with it, because otherwise it would completely stop a whole working day every time something got content ID'd. But with that, we are now moving on from the northern front and down towards Bakhmut, where we got to see a new kind of explosive being used by the Ukrainians, which is pretty interesting to see. It was filmed by a couple of Russians. These are some Russians in a trench.
40-й к мужикам. Вот они, короче, разминировали недавно хуйню такую. Вот они, пидоры эти, фашисты, что делают, короче, скидывают вот такую канитель. Вот видите?
This is a bomb, shaped like a piece of bark.
Fancy.
It's really fancy.
Ну, по серому будешь идти, да и по дню даже пнешь, да пнешь, деревяшка, да деревяшка. Вот тут, короче, втоптан был
And there's the bomb.
деревянный чипок.
And he's pointing right at his
Там,
face.
короче.
Yeah, he's like, look at it. He's like, look, it's a bomb. Dude, that's like taking a pistol that's loaded and looking straight down, like, look, I can see the bullet. I can see the bullet. It's just like, this is not a good
Все
idea.
дела, взрыватель. И вот такая вот канитель, блядь. Обшивают, короче, клеют. Настоящей
Now you can actually see
корой
the bomb
на
underneath.
дерево. Вот она, кора. Ну и вот такая вот залупа. Если на нее наступишь, то человек сразу, блядь, становится 200. Вот так эти изверги всякую хуйню придумывают. Ну, блядь.
You know, I just don't know where
маньяки
Russia
ебаные, хуй
finds these
говорите.
people that are
Бесы.
this dumb. I don't understand where they find people like this.
Novosibirsk.
Так уж вот.
That's where
Well,
Будьте аккуратны.
there is a place.
Такая канитель. Очень опасная.
Well, that's the end of that clip. But Matthew, you said, I don't know where in the world the Russians find people like this. I know where they find them. Russia.
Siberia.
No, just the country. Like, the whole damn thing. Just grab any of them. Put them out there. They're all going to do something stupid like that. Like that guy who pressed that doorbell on that tree and then that garland of explosives fell on top of him like a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Man, when you start falling for Wile E. Coyote traps, you know you've hit rock bottom.
Dude, that guy walked up to that tree and saw that giant sign that's like white with like the black text on it. And he sat there. He had never talked in his life. And he looked at it and he went, it says press doorbell. Okay. And then like the bombs fell on top of him and blew up. It's like what the hell is wrong with these like with some of these people? They're ridiculously stupid. But anyways, moving on out of the Bakhmut area where we got to see the bark bomb today, we're now going to be moving on down towards Pokrovsk. And actually to show you a little bit of what this front line's looking like right now, let me make sure to refresh this so we get the most up-to-date view. This is currently what the area is looking like, and it does seem as though the Russians are fanning out in all directions and continuing to advance a little bit further every single day. So we're going to be waiting to see how this really goes. It looks like this has ended up being a fairly significant breach of the line, and we'll be trying to get a little bit more information on how the Ukrainians expect to react to that here in the future. But moving on from that and into the clips we got today, we did get to see that the Ukrainian drones are hard at work trying to stop the Russians wherever they can. Alright, and we got some sad music here. Some of that frostpunk music. We can see the drones flying around trying to target this Russian truck that is driving like a bat out of hell. It's hitting every single bump in the street as well.
Man, thing is like a bucking Bronco going through there. The wheels weren't even on the ground half the time.
And it's going to be bucking no mo. And we can now see them going after a UAZ. Whoosh. Oh man, right into the driver's side door.
Ah, a fire.
And we can see them continuing to fly around there, finding a new target right now. And we can see the drone now finally picking up on that Russian vehicle after it stopped. It was another UAZ, gone and forgotten. Is that a Lada? A station wagon, maybe?
A whole lot of problems.
Oh, it's a Neva. Well, it's a Neva now. Oh!
Oh my god. Hey, look, that guy just ran off. What the hell?
Dude, it's like GTA out here. Like, he just get flung out of the car, stand up, and run away.
I thought for sure I was about to see the wasted and the whole like symbol like come on the screen.
Man, honestly, you kind of almost were, really, man. But still, beyond that, I have heard that some people are wondering, will Ukraine ever be able to take the city of Moscow? And it seems like some people are weighing in on this. And Matthew, what are people thinking? Are they thinking that Ukraine really could, or are they thinking that Ukraine really can't?
All right, so this is a question that everybody's been asking tonight, actually. A lot of people have asked us, so I put a poll up on it. Do you think that Ukraine will ever be able to take the city of Moscow? It looks like 44%, the most popular choice, was no, because Moscow is Putin's fortress. He's not going to let his home be taken, but he'll let the rest of the country be taken. 29% said maybe, but under extreme circumstances. And 18% said yes, Ukraine will take Moscow city eventually. And honestly, I have to say that based on the current progress that Ukraine is making, it looks like reaching Moscow is going to be a feat that might not be able to be accomplished. But I don't think that was ever the goal of the invasion of Russia. Zelensky says he was trying to create a buffer zone by going into Kursk. That's one possibility. I still think personally they're going for a land-for-land exchange. I still think that's the case. And I think Zelensky's trying to do basically some clever wordplay to try to cover that up. So I think that Moscow is a Putin fortress. They will probably never get to it, so they really don't have to worry about the fact that there are bigger defenses there. But I'm with the 45%. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say that I would believe, in my opinion, that Putin probably will never have to worry about having Moscow taken. I think that there's really no way the Ukrainians could ever amass enough forces or manpower at this point to be able to actually march on Moscow. They would never be able to make it that deep in Russia. That's 300 miles. You know, and for example, just to give you all an idea of how rough the Russians have it right now, 300 miles through Ukraine would be all the way pretty much from here on the border through Kharkiv and all the way to the Dnieper River, or the Dnipro River, all the way down its length. There's no way that the Russians are ever going to be able to do that right now, much less are the Ukrainians ever going to be able to push the Russians all the way out of Ukraine and then bring the war completely into Russia and then all the way to Moscow. Even at that point, they'd start getting nukes before they made it to Moscow, because that would actually be something where the Russians could justify the usage of nuclear weapons, and not really a lot of people would be really giving a lot of protest to that, because the Ukrainians would be threatening the existence of the Russian state, which is technically, at least by defensive doctrinal means, the reason why you're supposed to be using nuclear weapons. So in my opinion, I don't think the Ukrainians would ever be able to take it. It doesn't even matter if Putin didn't want to give it up, but he'll never have to give it up, because I don't think they'll ever get that close to taking the city of Moscow, just because of the geographical distance from the border to the city. But with that, we're now going to be moving on into the rest of our clips that we got from the area of the Pokrovsk direction. We got to see that that some Russians on a BTR-82 ended up getting slammed a little good bit, actually. We can see them here near to the BTR. We can see a couple of them panicking, like, "Oh God, it's a drone! Oh, and this guy almost get run over! Oh, oh, bled!
Damn, Bliat, that's unfortunate, Bliat.
Bled. It's not a good day. It'll be Russian in Ukraine, bled." And that thing's already, like, charred. Like, it got the charred appearance instantly. Instant charcoal briquette. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see more Russian units getting hit significantly hard in this area by the Muramasa unit. They're playing some trap. But we can see the tanks here. We can see the Ukrainians targeting the lead tank. And Haviland, you don't even want to read what those people are writing. It's some of the stupidest stuff. Like, the last person got banned. They said something like, hey, your channel's really good, but I don't like your titles. That's why I'm unsubscribing. It's like a really stupid take. It's like, if you like the channel, it's really stupid to unsubscribe because you don't like the title. And also, it's like, the title isn't clickbait. It's literally what happened. You know, it's like, sorry.
And also, I like to ban the hot dog trolls super quick, because they go through the trouble of creating brand new YouTube accounts to get around the bans I put on them previously. So they go through all the trouble of setting those accounts up just to get deleted in literally under 2 seconds. So I'm trying to basically crush the spirit on harassment on that one.
And they'll hear that, man. They'll go, "Quick, everyone make one and get in there." It's like, it's fine. It's literally just one click of the mouse for us. It's no big deal. Make more. We'll be happy to have y'all come in and have y'all waste like 10 minutes of y'all's time each. But that little Buhanka's burned out. Oh my goodness. That Buhanka's got the whole gang in it. Like, Zoink Scoob, I think we're gonna get it. Retro Raggy. Boosh. And they're gone. And we see that vehicle destroyed, these destroyed, another one destroyed, a couple of more destroyed right there. All of this just on one road in the area. Uh-oh, looks like this was about to join them. Oh, and look, there's another. Oh, there goes another Lotta. Lottas are about to become extinct these days. Oh, they're getting out of the car. They know it's coming. Oh, Lordy. Boom. And it's gone. The car is gone. And there we go. But with that, that's the end of the clip. Nice to see the little scary, ghoulish guy there at the end. And moving on from that and down in the Star on Mikhailivka, we got to see them hitting some more Russians today in the 59th Motorized Rifle Brigade. All right. Blicky. But we can see them now hitting more Russians with their drones. They're very effective with these drones. Wow, that one almost flew down the barrel. Dang. Pretty impressive. Oh.
This drone's got a schnauzer on it.
Also, Panama Flight, you got a good point. I don't know why people brag about leaving a channel. It's like honestly, like my take on that being the one who runs the channel, it's like, I don't care, you know, if you're leaving. It's like, I will see that when you unsubscribe, because it will be, you know, as many subscribers as we have, minus one number. That's like the whole, that's it, it's official, I'm quitting Twitter thing. It's like, that's so cringe. It's like, if you don't like a channel, just unsubscribe and go. It's like on top of that, it's not even like you're really saying your piece to the world. It's like, you know, you just get banned instantly if you put something like that, but it's really goofy. And it's like, you know, it is what it is. So I don't know why people do that. It's always goofy to me when people do. But anyways, with that, we're now going to be moving on from that clip and on into our next one down in the Volodar area, where we also got to see Volodar under some shelling. And it was some pretty significant shelling at that, if the video loads.
What's happening?
Here we go. Here we go. And so, pretty heavy shelling. Someone's got tuberculosis, but still, pretty
Also,
heavy.
it's like a call or something. It's like, what's all that yakking in the background?
Man, everyone's back there. It's an office meeting.
Man, sounds just like a miserable call center in there.
Man, it kind of does. But still, it looks like Volodar is once again under a pretty significant artillery barrage, and we have a feeling that they will probably end up holding again. They've always held Volodar. We're expecting that they probably still will, but who knows. But moving on from that and down to the Robotny area, we did get to see the Ukrainians taking out a little recon drone. All right. And we're going to be muting that. The little brat, or whatever the hell that was. And that thing went, I was like, all right.
This footage looks like it's a drone video from like 1957 or something. Oh,
what the hell?
We just got a gladiator up in here.
Whoa, look at that knight, and he's got the helmet. Wow.
He's part of the warrior cast.
Why in the world are we giving all our money to Ukraine when we could be giving it to our knights in shining armor or something like that? Man, but still, 117th Brigade, you got to give it to them. Taking out drones above the skies of Robotny. Really good to see. And with that, we're now moving on down to the Kherson, where we got to see another Ural got destroyed. Look at it. That thing was toasted. Roasted, even. Very nice to see. Hopefully, one of many others to follow. But with that, we are now moving on up into the area of Kyiv, where we get to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 921 of the war. And without further ado, here is the speech.
Українці, українки. Сьогодні знову Росія по звірячому ударила по Харкову. Станом на цей час майже 50 постраждалих, усім надається необхідна допомога. Рятувальники продовжують розбирати завали. Була інформація про людей під завалами. Звичайні цивільні об'єкти. Торговельний центр, палац спорту, міська забудова. Кожен такий удар по Харкову, по інших наших містах і селах доводить правильність нашої тактики, зокрема в Курській області. Ми маємо витискати війну додому, звідки її принесли в Україну. І не лише в прикордонні райони Росії. Держава-терорист повинна відчути, що таке війна. Ми працюємо, щоб якнайбільше російських військових об'єктів російської логістики, критичних об'єктів їхньої воєнної економіки, щоб все це опинилось в зоні доступу для нашої зброї. Зараз це забезпечують наші дрони. І я дякую всім в Україні, хто працює для розробки та виробництва дронів, а також усім, хто працює заради нашої ракетної програми. І усій зовнішньополітичній команді нашої держави, яка переконує партнерів, що далекобійність є ключем для завершення цієї війни. Своїми дронами і ракетами ми здатні виконати частину завдань. Але реальний мир, реальне завершення цієї війни – це комплексне завдання. І щоб примусити Росію до миру, щоб від брехливої риторики про переговори вони перейшли до кроків, щоб завершити війну, щоб очистити нашу землю від окупації та окупантів, потрібні і дієві інструменти. Я знаю, що цими днями і тижнями наші друзі у світі і журналісти, які поширюють правду про цю війну, і значна частина лідерів держав, громадських лідерів, політиків говорять, як важливо для наближення миру і порятунку життів мати дозволи на далекобійні удари та відповідні далекобійні ракети і снаряди. І це залежить від президента Байдена, від прем'єр-міністра Стармера, президента Макрона, канцлера Шольца та інших. Я дякую усім, хто переконує світ бути сильним і врешті перемогти російський терор. Жодна російська ракета, жоден російський удар не повинні залишитись без справедливої відповіді зброєю, санкціями, правильною політикою та економічною підтримкою для України. І відповіді правосуддя щодо Росії. Сьогодні я підписав кілька нових санкційних рішень. Санкції РНБО, майже 150 суб'єктів, юридичних та фізичних осіб, які забезпечують роботу авіаційної інфраструктури Росії, також ще один пакет санкцій проти колаборантів, тих, хто обрав працювати на зло, на війну. І завдання для всіх представників України – робити все, щоб українські санкції були синхронізовані зі світовими. І сьогодні ж була доповідь головкома Сирського. Передусім про Покровський напрямок, про наші дії, щоб стримати російські удари там і щоб знищити якнайбільше сил окупанта. А також був звіт і щодо операції в Курській області. Кожен день забезпечує нам поповнення обмінного фонду. Я дякую кожному нашому підрозділу за це. І ще одне. Хочу подякувати рятувальникам, які працюють саме на Харківщині, усьому колективу ДСНС України в Харківській області і особливо Юрій Сірий, Едуард Соколов, Сергій Білоус, Олександр Челак, Володимир Михайличенко. І також сьогодні я хочу відзначити Микиту Іванюка, капітана поліції, що працює на Харківщині, та Олега Шеремета, фельдшера, екстренки, які проявили себе в допомозі нашим людям. Дякую вам та усім вашим колегам. Дякую кожному, хто з Україною. Слава Україні!
And Herom Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 921 of the war. And that wraps up our news segment for today. Moving us on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. It has been a pretty crazy night tonight of news coverage, and not only that, fundraising for Nova Ukraine. We have raised about $5,119 in support of Nova Ukraine, and that'll be helping them out massively in their efforts to be saving lives and helping out others that are inside of war-torn areas in Ukraine. It is absolutely incredible to see the Lee Spring Army once again banded together to not only pass the fundraiser goal, but far exceeded, doing things that really no one ever expected the Lee Spring Army would be able to do for almost 3 years. It is one long-lasting community, and it's really good to see that y'all have continued on with hammering out successful fundraiser after successful fundraiser, because that is what the Lee Spring Army is truly known for. And so with that, I got to give a huge thanks to all of y'all once again. We're about to be moving on to the second segment. Make sure to stick around, though, because it will be fun. But also a big shout out to the 11,000 people who were here at the peak tonight, and also the 75,000 people who have watched so far. We were very honored to have y'all here. We don't know why y'all come here every single night, but we are highly honored and very appreciative to have y'all be here with us every single night, and y'all pick us as y'all's primary source of news on this war, and not only this war, but also other major events happening around the world whenever they pop up. And so that, a big thanks to y'all once again. And Matthew, can we get a shout out for all of the top donors that we have not called out so far?
Yes, we can. And with that, we're now moving into the final question segment of the night. And we have had some more top donors since the last time we called them off. And this one goes to Fachada, who puts in a $200 donation.
Dang.
This one also goes to Andy L, who put in a $150, along with Charlie Hernandez, who also put in a $50, along with Mike Smith, and also Mad Cat. Huge shout out to all 5 of you top donors right there, and huge shout out to everybody else who's donated in the meantime and brought us up to 5,124 smackaroos of the $3,000 goal. Huge shout out to everybody on that once again. And with that, it's now time for us to jump into our question segment because we have no more polls to address. So jumping into our Morse code decoders of the night, we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, and of course, her royal fluffiness, a newcomer to the Morse code decoders. And the Morse for tonight says from the LSA Signal Corps, same as last night, the sky is turning black with Ukrainian drones, and let's hope the Kremlin gets it. LLT, LSA.
And that doesn't sound of money, and y'all get the dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all for getting that correct on the 921st day of war. There are loads of things that y'all could be getting correct, but nevertheless, y'all continue to get the Morse code message right every single time without fail. And I gotta say that is really impressive. And a big shout out to all of our Morse code decoders for being able to understand the Morse code and get that message correct every single night without fail. Really impressive stuff, actually. And so, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on into our first proper live chat question. So, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into our first one. This one's going to go to Richard Shaw, who says, do you think that Turkey would get involved in the Middle East? Richie from Vodka UK. Long live the LSA.
Let's see here. Would Turkey get involved in the Middle East? Did I hear that correctly? Would Turkey get involved in the Middle East?
Yes, would Turkey get involved in the Middle East?
Turkey is already involved in the Middle East, I'll have you know. They are bombing the Kurds in northern Iraq. They actually ended up having one of their drones shot down by the Iraqis just a few days ago. And also, they have conducted an armed incursion into northern Syria and have been there for quite a while now. I think it's about 8 years at this point. And let me see if I can show you that, the Syrian Civil War map, and show y'all where the Turks are currently occupying the area. And it's these areas up here in the north in green. So pretty much everything north of Aleppo and everything in between Talil Abyad and also Ras Al Ain, I believe, if I'm pronouncing those correctly. But they created a security perimeter in these areas and have been holding it for roughly 8 years at this point. So technically they're already involved in the Middle East, but if you're talking about involved in the Middle East in regards to the Israelis, now, that is an interesting question. We don't really know if they would ever get involved in that situation. It seems like they would, but there also is some pretty significant reasons that they wouldn't. They are a NATO member, and considering that the United States is the leader of the Western Sphere and also the head nation of NATO, going against our interests in the region would probably end up boding Turkey very poorly, even in an intra-alliance sort of a relationship with other partners. So for that reason, I have a feeling they're probably not going to get involved in that regard with Israel, but they still are going to remain involved in the ways they are against the Kurds in northern Iraq and also against the Syrian Democratic Forces and Bashar al-Assad inside of Syria. Now, that is something that's also interesting as well. I want to point that out, is that the Turks have actually ended up conducting armed action against pro-Western groups and pro-Russian groups in the area because they jointly invaded Bashar al-Assad's territory and the Syrian Democratic Forces at the exact same time, pretty much going against Russia and America's interests doing so, and also they're bombing the Kurds, and the Kurds are actually a pretty significant American ally within northern Iraq, so once again, kind of going against our interests as a whole, but also going against Russia's as well a little bit, because Turkey does Turkey things, and there's no other way to explain what they do rather than that in a really simple way. Also, what is this group? Because I saw them here on the map. I've never seen them before. They're like just on the southern tip of the Turkish border. What is this group? Let's see, formed, let's see, there follow weeks of conflict in the Syrian interim government. Let's see here. Interesting. Led by a prime minister. Huh. This is interesting. That's very interesting. I've never seen this group before. I'll have to try and read and research about them a little bit more, because from what I knew, the involved parties at the moment was the Syrian Democratic Forces in yellow, the Bashar al-Assad regime, or the Republic of Syria in red, Turkey in green, and then this area, from what I understood, was under Syrian control, Syrian governmental control under Assad. I actually didn't know that there was a small little pop-up group that was holding this area, so that's actually kind of new to me. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least, you know, with how the current situation is unfolded in the Middle East and what we could probably expect in the future. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here, our next question is going to go to General Grievous, who says, what do you think will be the goals of Ukraine's supposed new counteroffensive next year?
I wouldn't really be able to tell you, because to be honest with you, an invasion of Kursk by the Ukrainians was unthought of on my end. I just never thought that that would ever happen, and then it did. So I really have no idea what the Ukrainians would be doing at this point. If they were to do anything, I have a feeling they're probably going to be going for a weaker soft spot, which would probably be the northern area near Svatove. That would probably be my best guess, because beyond that, the rest of the areas, like for example, the middle of the Donbass, nowadays, that's actually a really rough spot for Ukraine. And down here in the south, it's quite clear because of the Surovikin line and how heavily fortified it is. There's really no easy way for Ukraine to break through in that area either. So going off of that, I would have to say, I don't really know. Maybe the Svatove area would be where the next offensive would happen, but even still, I'm not entirely sure. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. I gotta thank you so much for asking a really interesting question, but that's maybe the best I could offer at the moment. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, this one right here is going to go to, I just want to ask this real quick, Enforcer. I'm not sure if you've gotten a chance to see it yet, but Andy L. said, ask Enforcer about the Polish info they sent you today. Is it a power move?
Let's see, the Polish info sent to me today. Was that sent to our Twitter DM? Because I haven't been on the Twitter DMs all day.
Honestly, not really sure. That's why I asked. I said, did he send it to you or who? So I'm not really sure.
Let's see here. Oh, here we go. It's in the Twitter DMs. So let's see here. Let's see forward. Part of it. Interesting. So let me read this a little bit. So let's see. It appears that Poland is going to be taking on some F-35A Lightnings here in the future. As far as that goes, I would say that that's going to be fairly standard. A lot of countries are getting the F-35A these days. Britain is. Let me think of everyone who is getting it. Oh man, I'm gonna have to go look because I can't think of all of them off the top of my head. So let me see here if I can find the list. Okay, here we go. So this appears to be the extensive list at the moment of everyone who has the F-35. So let us go through them and let us see. So Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Finland, Germany, Greece, Israel, Italy, Japan, the Netherlands, Norway, Poland, South Korea, Singapore, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and the United States. And there are some potential operators in the form of the Czech Republic, Romania, and Portugal. And then Turkey got smacked off the list because they bought some S-400s. Everyone got pissed at them for that. And then we decided to cancel all their orders because they ordered 30 of them. And then we just gave them their money back and said, screw you. And then they don't get any F-35s. So that's fun for them. But beyond that, to answer the question, Poland did have 30 something of these on order. And they were going to eventually get these orders. So it appears that this is just the first of many to to come. But it is good to know that Poland, being the bulwark of our eastern front, will have F-35s available because they are far more capable and far more advanced than anything the Russian Federation has currently at their disposal, or the Republic of Belarus. Also, hold up. No. Okay, there we go. That scared me, man. That scared me. But apparently they have a video here of an F-35 doing a test vertical landing on an LHD. And look at that. That's pretty cool.
That is pretty neat. I like that.
Man, it lands just like a Harrier. Someone's about to tell me it doesn't. I know the nozzles and everything are different. This thing, thrust vectors, it doesn't have nozzles like the Harrier. But still, it lands like a Harrier. And so I say it's kind of like a Harrier. But that's pretty cool. But anyways, with that, pretty neat to see that. But still, I hope that does address that well, Andy. That's probably the best answer I can give at the moment. I don't really know a lot about foreign acquisitions of the F-35 beyond Israel's, because we researched that one a lot prior, but that would be my best answer to the whole Polish thing as far as I can tell. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next live chat question is going to go to Kenneth Prosak, who says, why aren't the visas of the high-profile Russian propagandists and pro-Putin elites being revoked and sending them back to Uncle Putin?
From what I know, a lot of those pro-Russian propagandists are in Russia right now. I haven't seen many of them outside of Russia, you know, as far as Russian citizens on visas inside of foreign countries. I haven't seen a lot of them in foreign countries, for that matter. And if we're talking about pro-Russians here in America, they have free speech, so they can say and do what they want. Don't agree with it at all, and it's really an asinine stance that a lot of them take. But that's their stance to take. But beyond that, I think most of them are in Russia, like Solovev and many others, because they're on Russian state television pretty much every day. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Reborn the Fallen, who says, if Russia does go nuclear, will NATO or independent Western countries dogpile them?
If they just started nuking Ukraine for no reason, I think we would. But if they nuked Ukraine while they were inside of Russia and Ukraine was making rapid gains of territory in that sense, we probably would not. But if they just started nuking Ukraine out of the blue like tomorrow, we probably would get involved. Or we would end up saying, whoa, this is getting out of hand, we need to de-escalate, and then we would not get involved, and that would be that. One way or the other. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've got a question from Tam, who says, do you feel that small-scale tactical nuclear weapons will ever be used in the conflict if Russia becomes desperate enough?
I have a feeling that they would be used in the conflict if Ukraine started making massive gains inside of Russia. They probably will never be used in the current conflict we're seeing right now. So I would generally say no, in my opinion. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And we are on to the next one.
And this live chat goes to Richard Head, who says, did Poland ever find the Russian drone that went down inside of the Polish territory?
We didn't hear anything about what the search parties found. I'm assuming that they probably did find it, but they didn't release any information to the public. But according to our official information, they never found the drone because we never got confirmation of that. But if we were going off of unofficial logical conclusions, they probably did find the debris of the drone. It's just that they're not publicly stating what kind of drone it was or anything about it along those lines. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I know at the moment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we got a good question from Jacob Breckley. He says, how well could the F-105 Thunder Chiefs fare in Ukraine? He said also, LSA for life.
And LSA, and so with that, the F-105 would fare pretty badly. These things were retired out of service, I believe, a while ago. Let's see here. Retired in 1984, so these are about 40 years old. They are supersonic and can carry a decent bomb load, but they're not wired to really use any kind of modern ordnance. It's pretty much nothing but dumb bombs, and I think some of the earliest guided ordnance that the U.S. Air Force had at their disposal. I would not really expect that these things would do that well in Ukraine, to be entirely honest, because technologically, at least hypothetically, this thing is even behind a MiG-29 or an older Soviet aircraft that would be in service in the war right now. They are cool as hell, I will give them that. They are pretty neat looking. Let me see if I can find y'all a front profile of this thing. Here we go. That's what the air intake looks like. It's actually slanted towards the fuselage, like going inwards instead of outwards or anything along those lines. So it's a pretty unique kind of an air intake and also a design on this thing. But I would not think they would fare well in a war these days. They would end up getting smacked around pretty badly, or just completely flat out shot down, really without any kind of opposition, at least in my opinion. So really cool looking. They did well for their time, but completely obsolete by modern standards. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Ambrester, who says, will separatist movements in Russia be boosted/moved to rebellion by Russian losses?
Probably not. We have seen some uprisings happening in the Caucasus Mountain region for a while, and we haven't really seen any of them turn out into outright rebellion. Usually they end up getting put down eventually, and we think that that's going to remain the case until these forces are supplied and armed at larger numbers, possibly by Ukraine or another third party that's trying to instigate issues in this region. That would be my general assumption, because beyond that, we've never seen any armed uprisings elsewhere throughout Russia, except for this one standoff thing in Siberia, but that was really a thing about jade miners. It looked like an armed uprising against the government, but it was actually an armed hostile uprising against the police trying to put down a illegal jade mining operation that was going on, so that one actually got ruled out. And also, yeah, that's one hell of a statement right there, Matthew. A firefight started over an illegal jade mining operation.
That sounds something that would only happen in Russia. It sounds like something like that.
Yeah, it's like you can only come up with this in fantasy, because when I originally saw it, thinking logically, I was like, oh, a firefight would only happen in the middle of Siberia if you're going to start uprising against the Russian government, and this would be a fairly good place to start it. No, it was actually the cops went out there to shut down their mining operation. The miners were armed with AKs. Like, I don't even know where they got them from, and they just started hosing down the cops with these AKs. So that was what happened. They ended up getting put down as well. I think a lot of them ended up getting prison time, if I remember how that story ended correctly. But still, I don't really think there's ever going to be a massive armed uprising, unless if it's from the southern region in the Caucasus Mountains, and even then, it really requires external support for those to grow and blossom to their full potential. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
And this one is going to go to Brian Bokelman. He said, Enforcer mentioned that Koronivo is being leveled in a hypothetical battle, and has Russia evacuated these towns? And I haven't heard anything in forever.
From what we know, Koronivo has been evacuated. It wasn't like a mandatory thing. It's pretty much a optional thing, but the civilians have largely left. We don't think there's any large numbers left. The ones that are there at their own risk. Because while there is a massive effort to protect civilians, if a civilian is stupid enough for some reason to refuse to leave and they stay there and then they end up getting bombed and killed, that's kind of just what it is at that point. It really is collateral, because you can only try and mitigate civilian casualties so much until it becomes scientifically impossible to mitigate them, like, someone who's stupid staying there for some reason. So from what we know, pretty much everyone's gone out of Koronivo except for a very, very, very small number of people, and those people, whatever happens to them happens, because there's really no way to avoid it at this point from either side, for that matter. And so I hope that does address that the best I can. Most other areas actually had mandatory evacuations. Koronivo ended up getting onto the battlefield so quickly, there was never a mandatory evacuation called for that town. It was only a voluntary evacuation. But I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
And this one right here goes to Metal, who says, how far can Ukraine drive before we consider their forces overextended? And how far of a push could we see into Russian territory with the current status quo?
We could probably see a push all the way up to Lyubomovka and towards Rilisk, but at that point, I would say the Ukrainian forces would be stretched fairly thin based off of the number that we know or is there at the moment. So it's not as far as we originally anticipated making it to the Kursk nuclear power plant or the city of Kursk, but it would be a pretty sizable area of the Kursk Oblast. Almost a quarter of it would be under Ukrainian control by that point, but it still wouldn't be this massive area where you'd see Kursk under their control and they'd be rapidly advancing towards Oriel or down towards Belgorod. We don't ever think that's ever going to happen at this point. But I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next live chat question, the long-lasting live chat question, this one goes to AF Kaplan. He says, will Ukraine eventually have to choose between their offensive in Russia or defending their eastern territories?
At this point, it kind of looks like they might have to eventually, because it looks like the Pokrovsk front, because of the Kursk offensive, has ended up starting to do a lot worse. It was doing bad beforehand, and I said that when the Kursk offensive started, I was like, hey, it's already doing bad. I guess they decided to just go do something else instead. But it's really starting to go incredibly bad at this point. They're actually moving fairly quickly from what I can tell. And so going off of that, it might come down to that kind of decision. If it did, I don't know what Ukraine would choose. I would honestly choose defending the territories inside of Ukraine, to be entirely honest, instead of trying to start a Kursk offensive, because it's very clear that the Russians may have weakened their positions along the entirety of the line, except for in Pokrovsk, because they already knew that they had momentum in that area, and they weren't going to give up that momentum for anything. And so that may be the reason why we're seeing that they have not really slowed down in Pokrovsk, and now Ukraine is going to be forced with that decision most likely to either defend Pokrovsk with everything they have, or to continue on their Kursk offensive and hope that that ties up Russian forces in other areas that would have maybe conducted offensives otherwise. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Stephen DeWeese. He says, how many power stations or refineries will it take to really need to be destroyed to really hurt Russia?
Really only about 15 to 20% of the refineries need to be destroyed or out of action at any given time, and around 30% of the power plants have to be knocked out for there to be severe blackouts inside the Russian Federation, causing massive problems not only for the civilians, but also industry, commercial, and war industry as a whole. And also 15 to 20% of the refineries knocked out would ensure that there was around a 700 to 900,000 barrel deficit of usable fuel goods per day, which would end up compounding over the war and end up creating a major problem for the Russians over some period of time. We don't really know when. But beyond that, that would generally be the best time windows I could give. And once again, those are very rough estimates. They could be entirely wrong, but that would be my best guesstimate at what percentage of each would have to be destroyed. Because it doesn't have to be 100%. It just has to be a sizable fraction, like 25%. And that would end up causing a fairly significant amount of damage, because most logistical structures are made with the assumption that at least 90% or more of that given thing will be operational or working. If it's any less than that, then you're dealing with some pretty rough problems there, because you usually expect that most of the supply chain or most of an industry will be operational and efficient at that point. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next question is from Knox Date. He said, how much or what percentage is the Russian oil has gone down due to the recent Ukrainian strikes?
We don't really know how much it's gone down. We know that the oil facilities ended up taking pretty big hits, and a lot of the fuel inside of them was lost, but we don't really know how much. We never really get clear numbers on that, and so we can only assume that it inflicted a decent amount of damage in that area, but we really don't know how much. And getting into those kinds of percentages and quantitative kind of figures is really hard. We can kind of only take assumptions on the qualitative level here, because we don't get the number of fuel, well, the number amounts of fuel that is lost. And also on top of that, we don't really know how much was in each tank when it was stricken, and that's probably only known specifically by that Russian company, and we haven't seen that information published anywhere at this point. So it'd be pretty difficult to discern that with a great deal of certainty. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Alcasur, who says, if aerial drones exist, do you think that drone tanks would be the next big thing for armored warfare?
Drone tanks would probably be so heavy that they would end up being infeasible to use. You would have to have a drone that is so big it would literally be shot down instantly, pretty much. So I would doubt that drone tanks would be a thing. I'm highly expecting that there will be a wide variety of drones in the future for many different things, anti-personnel, anti-tank, that kind of stuff, because that is a natural evolution of this kind of weapon system. But as far as trying to turn everything into a drone, they probably will not do that. Drones will just end up being their own fleshed out niche of their own in the armed forces that will become a mainstream way of fighting, like it already is turning into right now. And then everything else, like tanks and infantry and armored personnel carriers and artillery, will all have to evolve to have some form of anti-drone warfare built into them to be able to combat this existing threat that clearly can level the playing field amongst a much weaker country and a technically much stronger country, at least at this point. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And let's see, we've got a good question. Also, real quick, by the way, huge shout out to Axel K, who put in a 50 Canadian donation to the fundraiser and brought us up to $5,139 raised. Huge shout out to Axel for that generosity. And moving on to our next question here. This one goes to Richard Shaw, who says, why didn't the United Nations go in as a peacekeeper force in Ukraine, I'm assuming? And he said, or is the United Nations a mute organization? Now, Richard, you want to know the real answer to that question? The real answer is the United Nations only goes in as peacekeepers in places where they feel like they can actually control the people there. If they don't feel like they can do that, then they simply don't go. So you'll notice they go to places where they can easily get a leg up on people. And, you know, that's kind of using logic at some point because, you know, you don't want to send in the UN to, like, for example, Ukraine, because they're probably going to get slaughtered by the Russians. They're probably going to be a priority target. But in my opinion, that's the answer. But Enforcer, what say you?
The real answer, if you're wanting to know the real answer, is that to send in UN forces anywhere, it requires the approval of the UN Security Council, of which there are 5 members, and those members are permanent and can never be removed. Those members are as follows: the United States, the United Kingdom, France, the Russian Federation, and the People's Republic of China. Those are the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. And so for the United Nations to send in armed forces into Ukraine, they would require a unanimous vote, a 5 out of 5, of all of these members saying yes, armed intervention by the United Nations inside of Ukraine against the Russian Federation and in support of national sovereignty and border integrity of the state of Ukraine is an imperative of the United Nations and should be followed through immediately. And so that would require the vote of all 5 of them. Clearly, one of those countries would not approve of that. Russia, because Russia is currently invading Ukraine at this very moment. And so they would go, no, I'm not going to approve a vote that sends the UN in where I have to also fight UN peacekeepers as well, somehow, some way. And so they will always veto that. And if one country does not vote in favor of something in the UN, it just does not happen. So you could have everyone on the same page. China, the US, France, and the UK could all vote, yes, send in the peacekeepers. And if Russia votes no, it just will not happen. And the reason why the UN is structured that way is because way back in the day when the United Nations was created in the 50s, the Soviet Union said, well, because, you know, to make sure that there is a way to break a tie, there's only 5 permanent members, and considering that the UK, France, and America are all 3 permanent members, I'm not going to join that council because that means that if it goes off a majority vote, you know, a simple majority of 3 out of 5, that means that y'all are going to be able to strong arm the Soviet Union every single time in these votes because y'all are all going to vote the same way. And so then a compromise was made where the US said, no, actually we're going to structure the UN to where it has to be a unanimous vote. So all 5 countries in the Security Council have to vote the same way, otherwise it won't happen. And so then the Soviet Union said, okay, then we'll join on that in that case. And that's why it's structured that way. And that's also why you can't remove Russia, is because they had to ensure back when they made the United Nations that the Security Councils were permanent and could not be removed. Because if they ended up getting removed, then it kind of negates the whole voting system anyways, because they could just go, okay, everyone, let's vote, and then everyone votes the same way. Russia says no, then they're removed from the Security Council, and then the next time the vote came through, it would be 4 out of 4, everyone would approve, and then something would be done. So that's why the UN's
Are you sure that they need the Security Council vote for that? Because I looked here, because it says that all they need is the consent of the parties. And there's 3 things here: consent of the parties, impartiality, and also a non-use of force except in self-defense and defense of the mandate. So it looks like, according to the UN on their website, that the Security Council vote is not required to send in peacekeepers.
From what I understand, it is, because that's what they did with the Syrian pirates. Well, not Syrian, the Somalian pirates back in the day. And also the consent of both parties. When did Serbia and Kosovo both consent to UN peacekeepers going into Kosovo?
Let's see. Let me pull it up. Let's see. Serbia and Kosovo. UN peacekeepers. Let's see if that information is on the search results. Let's see. Mm-hmm. Let's see here. United Nations. Let me do some looking real quick and I'll get back with you.
Got you. Well, actually, there's nothing to get back with me too. I'm honestly ready to move on to the next one because that was my answer. So I don't really know what to filibuster from here, but we will try and filibuster. So I don't know if y'all have heard this lately, but there's this new kind of a train here in America, a locomotive actually, called the SC-44. It's called the Charger. It's pretty cool actually. And what is called the SC-44? It's actually the Simmons Charger 44. So let me see if I can pull that up and show y'all this because it's actually pretty neat. It's one of the first American passenger locomotives made in like the past 15 to 30 years or something like that. Pretty cool looking. These things are really neat. I kind of like them. This is a Pacific Surfliner near the area of H Street in Del Mar, California, kind of on the coast, watching kind of looking at the beach, sort of. But still, pretty cool to see this. Pretty neat to know that America finally got a new passenger train. And this is what the modern ALCs, the Amtrak long-range charges, look like that are in service right now as well. I hope y'all are enjoying this filibuster. I don't know if Matthew's found an answer.
So the information is not easy to find. There's like an entire like order out here, the interim administration in Kosovo or whatever, that like outlines everything. It's very long. I don't see right off the bat though whether or not there was a Security Council resolution to it or not. But based on what the UN's saying on their website, which I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's just what they're saying on their website, it looks like only consent of the parties is needed. So I'm assuming that maybe they had consent of the parties, or otherwise it was a different circumstance.
I would say that they certainly didn't have the assent of the Serbians because the Serbians were the ones ethnically cleansing the Kosovans, and the UN came to stop the Kosovans from being ethnically cleansed. So I don't think the UN said, hey, Serbia, you fine with us stopping your ethnic cleansing? And then Serbia went, yeah, sure, why not? Give it a shot. I don't think they would have ever said anything like that. They would have been like, what? No, you're not doing that. And then they went in anyway. So I'm not really sure if that's true. Also, like, if that's the case that it requires the consent of parties, well, both parties, what is the UN keeping the peace of? Because if both sides agree something's so bad it needs to be stopped, wouldn't both sides have already come together and stopped the problem in the first place before the UN even had to show up?
Well, my question is, why does the UN even have an army to begin with? They don't need an army. They're not a government.
Well, the UN doesn't have an army. They actually contract these jobs out to the lowest bidder. So most of those countries ended up being countries from Central Africa or South America. So usually when you see a UN peacekeeper, it's not the UN army. That's a common misconception. It's like the army of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but they issue them blue helmets and blue body armor that clearly know that they're working for the UN instead of for the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Oh, whether or not they like maintain the army themselves or hire mercenaries is, to me, honestly, beside the point. They shouldn't be wielding forces whatsoever. The UN is not a state; it's not a government, and it's just a rigged organization, in my opinion. It's just useless. And I've never liked the idea of like non-governmental like organizations sending out forces like this. I've never cared for it. We should leave that up to the states to do that because they actually have power and they actually have citizens behind them. The UN is just some organization hanging out there that the citizens don't have any say in. So I just don't like it.
I would have to agree. Also, I don't like organizations that are completely useless, like where they have no actual power. Because when you give a statement in front of the U.S. Congress, whether y'all like the people who are in the Congress, the senators, the representatives, and all that, one thing's for certain: if you say something in front of the Congress, there's actual action to be made off of what you said, because the people you're talking to and the people in there actually have the power to pass legislation and have through the U.S. government as an apparatus have the ability to enforce that legislation that's made or that action that is declared. You don't have that with UN or the World Economic Forum or any other group like that. Anything that kind of falls under what I would say is a UN style model where it's just a talking place, I find that stupid. Because I cannot stand how people will get up in front of the UN, like you'll just be some person and they'll be like, hello, this is the most important day of my life. Let me soak it in. It's like these people can't do anything. It's like you're literally talking to a room full of useless people. It's like you could get more use out of talking to your local city council than you'll ever get talking to these people. It's like I wouldn't count on them for nothing. It's a stupid organization that is completely useless. And also, if we ever got requested for some reason, like if Matthew and me got requested, would y'all like to talk in front of the UN? I go, no, I've got better things to do. Because getting on the stream and just talking to y'all, and that's not like a put down or anything, but this is like to make the comparison here. Getting on the stream and talking to y'all is far more valuable to me than talking to the UN, because at least here on the stream, we can end up running a fundraiser or something like we did tonight. With the UN, what do I get out of it? I just end up having 5 minutes of fame in front of the UN and then just walk off. There's no end goal to it. There's nothing to actually be done there, rather than just bump gums. And I'm not into bumping gums just to bump it for the sake of it. I'm into actually having some sort of action done by the end of it, or having something come out of it. It doesn't make any sense to go and do something with no end, like talking in front of the UN or something along those lines. But with that,
I just don't like the idea. I just don't like the idea of an organization out there that's basically not beholden to any government out there, and they act on their own accord without the say of citizens. That to me, like people talk about elitism and like world governments and stuff like that, that's the type of thing that we should definitely rebuke and say, no, we're going to pass on that and not fund the UN, because not only is it useless, and also it brings basically no productivity to anything, because Russia can veto whatever we put out there in the Security Council. It's just it's against democracy, honestly, because since when did the citizens get to go to the UN and say we're going to vote on something? It's like we don't get to do that. So it's like, what's the theory behind keeping the UN around when we don't even really have a say as citizens in it?
it's some stupid forum for the nations to go to try and talk things out. But the UN's never solved anything either. I've never heard of the UN actually doing anything to help anyone. Like, whenever there was a problem between the Soviet Union and the United States, you know where they went? They didn't go to the UN. They didn't go and start talking about the stuff in front of the UN. No, they ended up solving it amongst themselves, because at the end of the day, the real matter of the fact is that the people that hold power in this world are the leaders of these individual nations, not the United Nations. The United Nations is completely powerless pretty much by design. And so that would be my opinion. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And also, Will Christensen said the UN was an American idea. And honestly, it was a stupid idea. I'll be perfectly honest. In my opinion, I think it was pretty dumb. I think maybe they had good intentions creating it, but they really didn't see how useless it would really become. But we see it now, so we should probably stop funding it, in my opinion. But anyways, jumping into our next one here, we have a question from William P., who said, do you think that Ukraine would ever get the old A-10 Warthogs?
We've talked about this a lot in the past on this channel. I'm not really sure if they will. It seems like everyone's kind of against giving it to them because everyone's kind of scared that it'll get shot down a lot and it'll cause a lot of pilot fatalities, to be entirely honest. But there is a possibility that they may get them. It's just a very, very small one at this point. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person through in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is David Kotke, who says, do you think that Ukraine will try to connect the offensive lines from where they push toward the other front line to the right? And it seems that would about be it.
Can you reread that one again?
He said, do you think that Ukraine will try to connect the offensive lines from where they push toward the other front line to the right?
If you're talking about in Kursk, I'm not really sure. And if you're talking about anywhere else, I'm not particularly sure, because I don't know what geographical location that is specifically speaking of, because there's about, I think, 600 miles of active front line right now, and there's several areas where they could do something like that, maybe, but I don't know which one that is, to be entirely honest, David. So unfortunately, I think I'd have to declare ignorance on that one for the moment, due to a lack of geographic specificity. I think that's the correct way to say that. But beyond that, it is time for us to round out tonight's stream. And what a stream it has been. 85,000 people have been here since the start of the stream, and we've had about 11,000 people here at the peak. We are entirely honored and greatly appreciative to be able to cover the news for each and every single one of y'all, and not only that, have the Lee Spring Army rally around and raise another $5,189 for Nova Ukraine, an amazing nonprofit that has helped out massively inside of Ukraine, helping to save people from war-torn areas and helping them to survive behind the lines. Of course, we will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine and everything else that may have happened in the meantime. But with that, I thank you all so much once again for watching. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, good night to you all, and once again, huge shout out to everybody for another successful fundraiser stream on a good Sunday, and also enjoy your Labor Day holiday tomorrow as well. I'll be honest with you, and now that I said Labor Day, I don't know why it popped in my head. I'm like, why do they call it Labor Day? I really don't know. I'm going to have to look that up afterwards.
It's for the American worker.
It's for the American worker, I'm told. So, very good. So, everybody take a break tomorrow in honor of Labor Day. But with that, thank you all once again. Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava. We'll see you all on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next Nightly War News stream, and hopefully midday tomorrow as well for a short war video. But with that, good night to you all.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its